Rockfin. Rumble. All right, here we go.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is the one and only Case Study QB. You may be familiar with a lot of his clips that I play on this stream and you see on other shows as well. What's going on, Case?
What's going on, Sabby Sab in the chat, and everybody, much love to you.
All right. So Case is here with some big news. We've been talking about this before behind the scenes, but now Case is ready to show that demo. So we've been talking a lot about like different options in reference to political parties, third parties, etc. And Case Study QB a while back came up with this idea for a mutual aid political party. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that. And Case, let me know when you're ready and I can put it up on the screen.
Yeah, let's go.
Take it over.
So first I want to give credit to RBN for introducing me personally to mutual aid. I don't know if I heard about it before that. I might have heard about it, but I didn't know about the significance of it until watching a lot of back then Fred Hampton leftists, now RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network. And while listening to you guys and going to all the different summits that we had about 3 various summits. Like every year we had like 1 or 2 summits. And the idea did come to me that, hey, what if you can marry mutual aid along with organizing, along with activism, along with if somebody's running for office, they can knock on doors and instead of just asking, hey, give me your vote, give me your donation, give me, they can say, hey, what do you need? Hey, what would you like? How can I impact your life right now? As people are knocking on doors, giving out flyers. And this is where this idea came from. So mutual aid party is a mutual aid ticket application. All right. And this is a book that I read that I thought was very helpful. Here's a quote from it. It says, mutual aid projects are a form of political participation in which people take responsibility for caring for one another and for changing political conditions, not just through symbolic acts or putting pressure on representatives, but by actually building new social relations that are more survivable. And this is by Dean Spade, author of a book called Mutual Aid. All right, so here are the pillars of this initiative, this organization. The number one thing we would like to accomplish is mutual aid. So I will always say that when this idea launches, if all we do is create thousands of mutual aid tickets, meaning helping thousands of people, then I would have accomplished my goal. If we do nothing more than that, I would be happy, me personally, as the person creating this idea. But the icing on the top, so that's phase 1, which we're about to get into, is the mutual aid ticketing system. But phase 2, which is going to be coming later on, phase 3 is going to be coming later on. Phase 2 is political education, because we need to let people, why do you need to look into monetary, MMT, modern monetary theory? Why do we need to look into UBI? Why do we need to learn about propaganda, media propaganda? How can you identify what is being left out, what's being left in, critical thinking? That's all part of political education, right? And then systemic change. That's where ballot initiatives, I know, shout out to Roger Meadows, electoral politics. That's where voting and all that type of stuff come in. That's where striking, wildcat strikes, all the various systemic changes that can go on will happen in that final phase. And that's why this is we're trying to create a party atmosphere, but don't get this twisted. This is a long-term project. So if you're looking for a short-term project, definitely join the Green Party, join one of the anything that's established right now. But this is like a 5 to 10 year project. But the most important thing is mutual aid. That's where we're starting off. As soon as we start the initiative, we're going to be focused on mutual aid. Okay, any questions yet, Sabrina? Anybody? Just want to make sure we're good.
This all makes sense to me. Go ahead.
Excellent. All right. So I'm going to be showing you these features right now. So the first features is how to create a mutual aid ticket. And then we're going to go through how users can answer a mutual aid ticket. So here's the website. I'm going to show you when you go to, and by the way, let me give everyone the actual website that you can be prepared, because I'm going to show it to you, everybody in the chat, and then I'm going to go away from it. So, or maybe I could, I can't post it in the chat, but everybody.
Just put it in the private chat and Eric can post it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll put it in the private chat, and Eric, my man, Eric can do the rest. Shout out to the 11 demands. All right. So here's the website that you guys can sign into however way you like to sign into. Let me go back to the site here. Boom. All right. So this is the front page of the site. This is not the actual site. This is just a demo. So, but everything else, the words, I was able to, the first time I did this, Sabs, and I introduced this idea, at the end, I had a call to action. I said, I'm going to need lawyers and I'm going to need copywriters. Copywriters are the people that come up with the wording. And I don't know if they want me to say their names, but I got two very great, awesome copywriters that contacted me. I did several meetings with them. We were able to go back and forth on emails, and they helped me create the copy that's on this front page. So shout out to them. And that's the power of us working together, me being introduced to your audience, and the synergy that we're having right now. Okay, so, and let me just show this just for good merits. So at the bottom here, I have the Instagram. There's no pictures there yet, but guess what? I created the Twitter for Mutual Aid Political Party. Guess what happened? Oh, let me show it here. Boom.
What?
Like straight out the gate. I just created it, and then I went back to see what was going on, and it said account suspended. I didn't even put up a tweet yet. I don't know. I don't know what happened. All right.
Maybe title it MAPP.
MAPP?
I wonder if it's the mutual aid part.
Maybe,
Boy,
but
I tell you.
Yeah. So okay. So now I'm going to show you how to create a ticket. So for everybody who's following along at home, here is and you can at the top it says, let me cancel this for a second. At the top it says running a test. So you could close that if you want to. Boom. Okay. Create a ticket. So let's say wash car. I need help washing my car. Let's say I have disabilities and I can't wash my car or something. Need help. Okay, so you could put it at whatever priority that you want to put it at as the person creating the ticket. This would be on location. So remote is if you need help, you just want somebody to talk to. Let's say you need some for mental health purposes. Let's say you have a computer that you're having problems with. That this is stuff that you can do remote. Anybody in the country can remote into your computer, etc. But on location is when you have to actually go to somebody's house or etc. Right? Okay, so then you could put either ASAP or you can put actual date. So let's put in the date and then boom, hit submit. And then that's going to come up. Where did it go? Wash car. Boom, there it is. Right? So Sabs, I don't know if you're if you can see that on your side.
Yeah.
Can you see it says wash car? Click on the link, because right now we're going to do this live that Sabs is going to apply to help me with this ticket. All right.
Okay.
So if you see it, then you at the bottom, you should be you wouldn't see update complete because I'm the person who created the ticket. Only I can see those buttons. On your end, you're going to see the button says apply. Is that correct?
Yep. So I just hit apply.
Well, yeah. So you just hit apply. Now I need to work on the functionality that in real time it will pop up. But I'm just going to go out and come back in for right now. Boom. And there goes Sabs. So I know you got you create a new site, and I know your avatar's not there yet, but that's all right. You have your username there. So I say, oh, I got somebody here that wants to help me out. Okay. I'm going to accept her help. Boom. Accept. Let me go out, come back in. Boom. And there is a check mark. Awesome. So now let's say Sabby comes over, helps me out, and then we're done with the ticket. I would go back in, hit complete. All right. Let me go back in. Boom. Now I can rate Sabby on how she helped me out. So I'll give her 5 stars because Sabby's the best.
Yay!
She did great. All right. Boom. All right. So we hit enter review. And then boom. What happens now is if I go to her, if you go to anybody's account, you can get their rating. So this is like, what's going to happen is you can go to mutualaidparty.org. That's going to be the final website / sabrinasalvati or whatever your username is. So in this case, it would be /Adam. And then you would have a rating system up here. And then they're ticketing the requests that they're putting in. And then eventually you'll also see the tickets that person answered and what ratings, all those kind of details, so that you're going to be able to differentiate people who might have lower stars. You know, the way I describe it is, think of it like with Uber, right? You want to hold both people accountable. You want to hold the driver wants to know that, hey, I can't just treat anybody any kind of way because they could give me 1 to 5 stars. And I want to make sure my star ratings are good. And then vice versa. The passenger knows, hey, I don't want to act crazy, which we've heard those stories, unfortunately, on both sides. But that's how we keep everybody accountable, etc. So hopefully anybody has any questions. Oh, Sabrina, you have any questions in regards to that?
No, okay. It all makes sense to me.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go back to here. So we did this first part. Now we're going to talk about the team side. A user can create an organization can create a team, and a user can join a team. And this is where it gets powerful. This is where this idea gets more powerful, because to get to that part of systemic change, we need to come together. We need to be able to collaborate. We need to be able to say, hey, after building camaraderie with each other, you know, there's this issue that street on Craft Avenue has so many holes, and it's been like that for years. We really need to go to city council and figure out how can we get them to fix these streets. That's the whole point of this mutual aid party, is you start organizing as teams. And then as a team, you can go ahead and solve issues in your community directly. I don't care about the presidential level, the Senate level, and the House level. I don't care about that yet. That's, like I said, 5-10 years down the line. I care about the community, city council, mayor. We keeping this on the ground. That's how we're starting off. And a couple of examples of teams that I would love to see eventually is like the Green Party of Brooklyn, Workers Strike Back of Queens, RBN Boston chapter in this example that we're here, a community garden of Newark. So just somebody that wants to create a team of teaching people how to create a tomato garden or a vegetable garden, etc. They can create a team where they can help people do that. And I'm going to show you that shortly. Churches can create a team. Okay, so let's go back to the website. Boom. So here's the tab called Teams, and here are examples of teams. So here's Mutual Aid of Plainfield, New Jersey, for example. And this is also going to have mutualaidparty.org/team/ and then they will have their username. So the way you think about Twitter, where you have twitter.com/your username, that's the same idea with your own username. And then also with teams, they'll be able to have their own page. So under profile, you'll be able to put what your initiative is, what your directive is, a summary of what you're trying to do. And then under members, you can show your members list and the roles they have, people that are with your team. And that's something I'll have to talk to somebody like Sabby, who's actually organizing a chapter. Maybe that's something you want to keep private. Maybe that's an option that we can do. Right now, there's no option. It's just showing the membership, but that's something that we can talk about down the line. Okay, so here's the powerful point. Our services. And I remember listening to Sabby, and at the end, she was talking about her Boston chapter, and she was like, hey, there's certain things that we're going to specialize in that we want to do. So this is where that comes in, our services. So when you create a team, only you will have access to a button up here that you can literally create tickets, and the tickets will show up down here. So let's say this mutual aid party of Plainfield, New Jersey, what they specialize in is food for the unhoused, repair houses, and giving rides to groceries. Like, that's what they say. Hey, we don't mind doing other things, but this is our main directive. When you come here, we're more likely going to do these tickets. So you will be able to put pre-made tickets, and then somebody could click on create ticket, and boom, it's automatically filled out. And then you could just fill in the rest of it, like what dates you would need it for and how high of a priority it is, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And then when you do create the ticket, it's going to come up under services needed. So now the people who are members of this team, they'll be able to, like, every day, every other day, when someone's available to do a ticket, they'll come here and say, hey, let me see if anybody needs any help. Oh, there's a ticket here that somebody needs help. Let me reach out. And that's how you'll be able to, the same way Sabby applied for that previous ticket, you'd go through the same steps here. And then if you want to join, you just click join, and boom, it would allow you to join.
Can I show them something really quick?
Sure. Go right ahead.
So just to show you guys, like, what Case is referring to, when I sent out the form for the RBN Boston chapters, notice I give you an idea of what we specialize in here. So I put financial literacy, self-care, higher ed alternatives, mental health counseling. Obviously, you have to be licensed in the state for that. Housing and tenant rights, grow your own food, Marxist theory, how to start a worker co-op. And then there was the option of other. So that's what Case is referring to. Like, what are we focusing on in Boston? And those are the things that we're focusing on.
Perfecto. So that's exactly it. And I think that's the basics for right now that I want to show. There's nothing else. And there's still some little, I found some bugs actually while I was going through there, some little knickknacks that I have to fix. But that's the overall picture right now for what we want to show. And when we launch, we're going to be in that phase 1, and we want to get people up and running, creating tickets and answering tickets. And then we're going to go on from there. So the goals that I have is that we want to have at least a team in 50 states. Now, once we get to 50 states, then we get into the cities and into all the nitty gritty, the towns, and it's going to spread that way. But what I'm looking for is having what I call onboarding captains. So these are people who are going to be responsible. So let's just say Gamer for Life, my man that's in the chat. Much love to all my people in the chat and Bad Cookies. Let's say Gamer was like, hey, I want to be down with it. Let's say I forgot where you live exactly, Gamer, but let's say you live in New York. All right, I want to sign up to be a onboarding captain. I'll email wegottus@mutualaidparty.org. This is it right here. And say, hey, I want to be an onboarding captain for New York. All right, so I'll reach out to you. We're going to be in communication. And basically what I would like to have you do is contact churches, already established mutual aid organizations that might be in New York. So let's say if you're in Kansas, I think KC Tenants is a popular mutual aid organization. So you will be reaching out to all these different organizations inside New York to try to convince them to join the website, and basically letting them know that this is going to be an easier way to organize, and going from there. All right, so that's the website. Yeah, so help us get involved. We got us at mutualaidparty.org. This is just the beginning. You want to be there when you say, well, I was there when that organization first got started and I helped them out. So I appreciate you and appreciate everybody. I think I can't stop sharing. I think we're good.
All right. Robert said it really works. This has been going on in my neighborhood for years, but not using the political. This is a great idea. 100%. And Violin has a question. Is there any recognition given for X amount of hours completed, etc.?
Yeah. So that's something that I definitely want to implement. Just to let you know how hard it was just to get to this point. I think I started back in last November, and I had a goal of finishing it at the end of March. And here we are in June, about to launch. We've gotten really close to dotting the I's and crossing T's. We're not exactly done yet. I'm hoping to be done in maybe a week or two and actually do a fully launch. The next place I plan to go to is our guy Kit from Hardlands Media. That's the next show I plan to go on to. Yeah, but we're going to be adding the different phases, the political education and the systemic change, but also on that user page, we are definitely going to gamify this idea, meaning, hey, that person, Sabby, created 5 tickets or answered 5 tickets last week. Wow, I gotta beat Sabby. Let me try to do 6 tickets. And in this fun competition, and it's also holding us accountable. So for example, when I found out about mutual aid, and I looked up, I said, let me go to New Jersey. That's where I live. If there's any mutual aid organizations in New Jersey. And I found some. I was like, wow, okay, there's a mutual aid organization here. I had a problem with groundhog underneath my deck. And I was like, I don't want to pay to have somebody come and take him out because I don't have the money for that. So let me see if I could reach out to a mutual aid organization. Nobody got back to me. It was absolutely silence. And I'm like, I wonder how many other organizations out there that if you find out about mutual aid and like, oh, I want to create a mutual aid organization, but oh, we already have 5. Oh, we don't need another one. But those 5 are dead organizations. That's a problem. So this is going to be a website that shows accountability to show how active you are, and it's going to hold the organization accountable so that you can see when the last time they helped somebody. So I'm hoping that this can help with that. All right.
Right. And I want to show you guys what Case means when he says some of these organizations may be dead. There's a website, I've shared this on this show like multiple times before, but mutualaidhub.org. If you go to this website and you click on table of networks, it lists all the different states.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And the cities and different types of mutual aid organizations here. But sometimes you may click on one of these or contact and you'll realize like it's not active anymore, right? So that's that's just an example that Case is referring to. But yeah, if you want to see if there's something in your area, I would say start with mutualaidhub.org. Eric, if you can share that link for people in the chat, that's how you can tell if there's anything in your area, and then you can contact them to see which of those organizations are still active and are actually still participating.
So a perfect example, and I just took note of that site myself because I wasn't familiar with it. But like, as far as I know, there's no way to click on each mutual aid organization and see what was the last ticket they fulfilled, because that's a way that you can tell if they're still active. Like on various social media, they have that feature where you can see, it'll say like last seen or last logged on, the last time a user logged on, and you can see if that person, like Twitter, for example, if somebody's last tweet was from 2013, it's pretty safe to say that the person is not on Twitter that much anymore, right? So that's kind of the what we're trying to do here with mutual aid parties: hold the people, users accountable, build a community, gamify it so that it's fun, and go from there.
Yeah. That's right. And I think this is the one thing that I like about this. And I know you've been talking to me about this for a bit, but the one thing I like about this is oftentimes we would gather together to support a political candidate, and they make all these promises to the American people, right? And then for those who do win, like the squad, for example, they get into office and then they don't fulfill those promises, or they vote in the opposite way in reference to that legislation on those issues that they ran on, right? And then you just end up disappointed. Well, the point of this that I think makes a lot of sense is that maybe it's gotten to the point where we need to stop. We need to change the way that we've been doing things politically, where the politician comes to us and says, donate to me, support me, canvass for me, and then I will, in return, do these things for you because you are my constituents. We need to flip that. The candidates need to be doing things for us regardless if they win or not. So if they're actually like participating in this mutual aid party that Case Study has, even if they lose, the people still win because they're doing things in the community. And I think that's the important key, because oftentimes that isn't what's happening. They're not doing anything. Like they'll tell you they're going to do things and then you support them and then they win and then they fall short and then we get disappointed and we keep repeating that cycle. Maybe we need to flip it and we need to ask them to do something for us in the beginning, not if they win. So they should be doing mutual aid within the community. There's one person who does this. She's is really I sent it to you before, Case. We were laughing at the video.
Oh yeah, you did. I remember. Yeah.
Laverne Spicer. Yeah, she's conservative.
Yeah.
But one of the things that she does do though is she runs like a whole food pantry. Like she does donate and give back to people in the community, regardless if she was a candidate or not. So here's the thing. If someone like Laverne loses, the people in her community still win because she's still helping the people in the community. And oftentimes that does not happen. So I think something like this is very a great idea, I think.
Yeah, that's the powerful point of the going and helping people, because you're not asking them, hey, by the way, are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? Oh, you're a Republican? No, we're not helping you out. We're going to the next door. You're not doing that. So now you're going, treating people as people, and then you might be able to win the vote of somebody who traditionally votes Republican, or more importantly, don't vote at all. That's the most important, because we're reciprocal creatures, human beings, that if you do something for me, naturally, I'm going to want to do something for you. So that's what I think is going to make this idea powerful. And I look forward to the launch of this and working with people like you, Sabby, and RBN and other networks, Workers Strike Back. I'm hoping to interview Shama next month and see if she will be interested, in this idea, and going from there.
That's right, Case. And speaking of Workers Strike Back, you were just in New York City for the launch of Workers Strike Back. I see you got your t-shirt.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the event. I played like one of your clips on here where Chris Hedges said that he was going to contact Cornel West to put him in touch with the Green Party. What was that like? I went to the launch here in Boston, and I thought it was great. There were a lot of union leaders and organizers, and the railroad workers were there as well.
Yeah.
So let us know, how did it go?
Yeah, they had a representative from the writers' strike, that's going on right now. I thought it was an awesome event. Traveled there on the train, got to find a place real easy. They had signs showing where how to get to the auditorium. I think they were very professional in that sense. When I got to the auditorium, they had a table with t-shirts, pamphlets. I got a whole bunch of pamphlets in my bag. And I went in, sat down. They had an announcer who started off the event, and then they went into the panelists. And man, I wish I was able to meet Shama afterwards, because I did interview her in the past. So I hope she would have remembered me. But unfortunately, I had to run to work, so I had to leave a little bit early. But at least I was able to see the full panel. And then on my way out, I was able to talk to Bree and talk to Chris Hedges, which was awesome. That made my day, and take a picture with them. But I watch Shama so much on YouTube, but hearing her in person, she is so dynamic. She's so charismatic. She's so on point with her rhetoric as a worker, a fighter for the working class. And Chris Hedges has such a wealth of knowledge with his historian, knowledge, and just being able to give us the information. And then Bree did an excellent job at moderating the event. I really enjoyed myself. I'm looking forward to the next one. And they also had, like I said, somebody from the writers' strike. They had somebody from union, Amazon. They're working with that right now. I think their biggest initiative is there's Amazon union. I want to say Kentucky, but
yes,
okay.
The biggest one.
Yeah, that's going on right now. So we need to help them get the word out there. We need to help them build momentum for that as much as possible. That's why I bought a shirt. I want to help support them as much as I can, because they're the ones right now. Like, my project is a long-term project. This is a project that you can get your hands on right now to start helping them out. Become a member if you could give $5-10 a month to their organization, because they're going to use that with the Shama was talking about when she was a city council member. She took only workers' wage, and then whatever was left over, they put it in like a strike fund. And they were able to use that to help build power. And it's unfortunate, but in a capitalistic system like America, you need to have capital to be able to fight that system. And that this is one way that we can do it cleanly, by getting money from the working class.
That's right. And I learned something about you, Case, when I saw this picture. So awesome picture here. Here's what I learned. Ladies and gentlemen. Oh, let me come out of that way. I learned that Case is a lot taller than I thought. And I know you're taller because I know you're taller than me. You know how I know?
How you know?
Because, okay, so I've seen Chris Hedges in person before at the Julian Assange rally. I'm a little bit taller than Chris Hedges.
Okay.
So I know you're taller than me. So when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, I thought Case was short.
Yeah, I'm just, my license says 6 feet and I'm sticking to what my license says. That's it. I'm not giving the real height, but yeah.
Yeah. Awesome event. And I think, like, what do you think, Case, in reference to, like, you know, there's some division, like, on the left, like, obviously, but in reference to people coming together and working towards, like, a common cause, like, obviously it seems like it's not going to be around one candidate in particular, and that's totally fine. But when I look at something like Workers Strike Back, I feel like that's something that everybody, particularly on the left, should get behind, because all of us should find a way to support the workers.
Yeah, I totally agree. Certain issues are just common sense to be able to help out. When Amazon unions are trying to build power and to try to unionize, that should be a no-brainer for organizations to try to reach out. I thought the Medicare for All marches, whether it was the first one where they marched in different cities or the one where they all went to DC, these are just a no-brainer. Like, we should be able to come around, organize around these type of issues. I understand people saying, oh, this person's involved, that person's involved, but at the very least, even if let's call it a circle of trust. If somebody's outside of your circle of trust and you don't want to mess with them, you should be able to create your own circle of trust and do that same initiative over here. So let's go back to the Amazon union example. If this person over here is in a different circle of trust and you don't like a person there, you can say, okay, I'm not going to mess with that organization or what they're doing, but I'm going to create my own organization over here and try to do the same thing. And then somebody that might be cool, like I consider myself somebody that's an intermediary, that I'm cool with almost everybody, that I can say, okay, we're going to go over here and we're going to march. And then I'll go to that other circle of trust, say, hey guys, they're going to be marching over here. You guys don't have to talk to each other, but we can all show up in numbers and show numbers count. You know, we saw that Rachel Maddow, when she was trying to poo-poo that anti-war march, one of the things she pointed out was like, oh, there's not a lot of people here. Or people like to look at the crowd and say, oh, there's not a lot of people there. If we could get 10,000 people to an event, which is going to be the goal, we got to think big. We got to go for the big goals. We're going to have 10,000 people going to DC. If that happens, people who don't agree with each other on every single thing are going to have to go to that initiative. So that is the goal, Sabrina.
That's right. I think we have a comment here from Roger. Thanks for the super chat, Roger. So the ticket is filled out by who needs help.
Yes. And then if you're somebody that wants to help somebody, and when you're helping that person, you can talk to them. I know Roger does it all the time. We go to call in. By the way, I'm going to be on the call in for like the first hour to answer any questions. Roger does it when he does his Uber or Lyft, and he's having people listen to Sabby, and he's talking to them about initiatives. He's trying to register people as independent. That's exactly what you would do, Roger. You would go answer tickets while you're helping them out and say, hey, by the way, did you know about this initiative that's going on? Oh, no, I didn't know about this initiative. Oh, can you sign up? I guarantee you, Roger, that if you had like 20% of the people you talk to signed up as independent, if you do mutual aid, it'll probably be like 80% of people, because you're helping them. They're going to feel okay, yeah, I can definitely do this for Roger if you're going to help me out with this other thing.
And Rome does this too, guys. When Rome does Tour for the Poor, when he goes to different cities and does mutual aid, he does the same thing. He's also talking to people, educating them about the system that we have in place. So I think it's, you can't just drop off like items to people and say, peace, see ya. It's also about the education that I think is also important.
That's exactly it. And we want to also recruit them to join to help other people, because that's what mutual aid is all about. It's not about charity. Charity is just one person giving money all the time, helping out all the time, and not expecting anything in return. No, this is not what that is. Mutual aid is, I'm helping you because one day I will need help. So we need to be able to also recruit those people to the website so that they can, let's say they're a dentist. Hey, can you help give a free cleaning? Or can you help have a dental class on how to keep your teeth hygienic? All these, if you're talking to a lawyer, hey, I helped you out with such and such. Can you help me out? Fill out a contract. It has to be both ways. And that's something that also we're going to gamify. We're going to have to show how many tickets you answered, but also how many tickets did you put out there that you need help. Because I know a lot of people are going to feel like they want to boast, or not boast is the right word. Some people are going to be too proud to ask for help. Some people might be too proud to ask for help, but we want you to ask for help.
That's right. That's right. Well, Case, thank you so much. And guys, Case will be on call in tonight. So if you have more questions about it,
yes,
join us on call in.
Yeah. Much love to you, Sabby. Much love to the chat. I see all my usuals. Too many people to call out, but I love you all in the chat. Much love to you all. I'll see you later. I'll hear you later on call.
All right.
All right.
See
Bye-bye.
you, Case. All right, guys. Yeah. So it's really important that, a lot of times I think we do talk about the problems, but I think it's important that if you're talking about the problems, we need to offer solutions for people, right? Like, don't just complain about what is wrong, because eventually if you just complain about what's wrong and you don't give people, any type of path to choose, it can be kind of depressing and it can be kind of a downer. And I don't want to be a downer. Let's just get right. I don't want to be a downer. Okay. So yeah, that's one of the projects that we can get involved with. And then also, you guys, those of you that are part of the RBN Boston chapter, I sent you an email today. So you should have received that from me. And it tells you about the next steps, what we're going to do next going forward. So make sure you check your email. But yeah, we got to help each other, people. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric, and then we will get started. Thank you for the super chat. The tip on Rockfin, Roger. This is horizontalism, direct democracy, involvement in the community. Everything is transactional. Use mutual aid to establish relationships with the community. You gain their trust and establish solid relationships. They know you, they trust you. Because you are in the community, use that as your army to launch citizen ballot initiative amendments to pressure state lawmakers to turn you into a CBI state. 100%. Thank you so much for that, Roger. So that's important. You have to establish that trust within the community. Really quick, want to give a shout out to those of you who are Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much. You're doing the damn thing as usual. Doing the thing. Oh, whoopsie. I need to go back to the beginning. Almost revealed the new ones. Thank you to everyone who's a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, Sabbies, and don't forget about those members there. Thank you guys so much for your support. You can see all their names listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Sabrina Sela and LB. LB's in the house. There's been an LB everywhere I've lived. I've always known an LB, no matter what state I've lived in. It's funny. Okay. We have quite a bit to talk about tonight, you guys. And I'm not going to be here Friday or Sunday. I'll be here Thursday, but not Friday or Sunday, because I'm actually going to the woods. Or I guess not the woods, but I'm going camping. So yeah, I will be in Maine with the frogs and the bears and I'm not going to see any bears, but anyway, it's that time of year. So let's go ahead and get into our thumbnail so you can see what else we're going to discuss tonight. Should be a pretty interesting night. I think so. Tonight, we are discussing Glenn Greenwald and RFK Jr. Yikes, 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 yikes. If you have not seen this interview, we're going to go through, there's 3 parts of this interview I want to focus on tonight, but the full interview is on Rumble. And oh boy, I think this is probably the first time I've seen RFK Jr. uncomfortable in an interview. And I think Glenn really asked really good questions. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Jeffrey Epstein news. This is huge in reference to the settlement. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Tara Reade is stuck in Russia. We talked about this a little bit about a week or 2 ago. I have an update for you about that. And we're also going to discuss Jeremy warning. There is a warning from Germany And that guy right there is the vice chancellor of Germany. And I think you're going to want to hear this. And of course, Case Study QB was just here to talk about the mutual aid political party. All right. Let's go ahead and get into our first story, which is this settlement in reference to Jeffrey Epstein and JP Morgan. So I want to just backtrack to walk you through the events here. About a month or two ago, I explained to you that it had been revealed that JP Morgan actually was connected to Jeffrey Epstein because he was, part of their bank, and they actually funded those activities that happened on Epstein Island. Then later on, I explained to you that it was also revealed that JP Morgan apparently connected with Epstein in reference to the banking relationship after he had already been convicted. So they knew who he was, they knew what he was doing. And then I gave you another update that said that JP Morgan actually knew what the activities were that they were funding. So this has been an ongoing situation. Names have been released like Noam Chomsky, Woody Allen, which that one actually did not surprise me, Chris Rock, all these people whose names have ended up in that black book, so to speak. But I'm pretty sure there will be more names, I think, that will be released in the future. But because JP Morgan did admit that they knew, there has been a settlement that has been offered to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And I want to go ahead and get into that clip first.
Banking giant JP Morgan Chase agreeing to pay nearly $300 million to victims of accused and now deceased sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. The accusers say the bank ignored repeated warnings about Epstein, thereby allowing him to continue abusing girls and young women, all because he was a valuable client. Epstein killed himself while behind bars in 2019 before he could stand trial. Today,
I just want to pause there and let you know that think about what she just said, that JP Morgan knew, but they felt like Jeffrey Epstein as a client was more important and more valuable than those girls' mental capacity. They felt like that was more important. Let's continue.
A settlement still needs the approval of a judge. It comes just a few weeks after Deutsche Bank settled an Epstein lawsuit for $75 million. So joining us now is Kaja Whitehouse, senior finance editor with Business Insider. Kaja, thank you so much for being with us. How significant is it that this big time bank is now, no question, associated with Epstein and not in a good way?
I think it's very significant. Jeffrey Epstein, we all know, was a client of JP Morgan's for 15 years, from 1998 to 2013. And as with many things, Jeffrey Epstein, a lot of financial institutions, a lot of people, a lot of powerful people continue to have relationships even after he was convicted of procuring a child for prostitution in 2008. It was really only after he was charged in 2019 with sex trafficking, because it had been determined that there was a sweetheart plea deal back in 2008, that a lot of you started to see some of the lawsuits you see now, and some people sort of maybe stepping down from roles, and some consequences for that.
So I just want to point out to you, for those you are not aware, 2008 was the first time that he was convicted. He has been convicted more than once. I think a lot of people know about the more recent time, but he has been convicted prior to that. And it's that time point after 2008 where people still chose to have a relationship, whether it was a business relationship with Jeffrey Epstein or not. They still chose to do it because they felt like their bottom line was more important, and their bottom line was money. Because screw the victims, basically. This is a bank. You guys realize how big JP Morgan is? It's one of the top largest banks in the world. In the world. It's huge, very powerful. Let's continue.
Kaja, this case claims that bank employees knew and were concerned about Epstein's money withdrawals because he was paying, underage girls for sex. But as you just laid out, he stayed a client for years. Do we know why bank executives allowed that to continue? I mean, does it all just come down to the almighty dollar?
Yes.
So I think it depends on who you ask. As you just pointed out, Epstein's victims say that they kept him around because he made them a lot of money. And a couple of years ago, the New York Times reported that high-level executives intervened to keep him as a client, even after compliance officials flagged him as a risk, because he played a lucrative role in helping them recruit new customers. You know, as we know, he's got a lot of billionaire friends. But if you ask JP Morgan, they paint a very different picture, and that's some of what will continue to be litigated in other cases. They have denied that reporting. They paint this picture that, you know, executives didn't really know much about his 2008 plea. They didn't really know what was going on.
That was actually debunked. I'm sorry, but I reported that like weeks ago. That was actually debunked. So even the CEO, Jamie Dimon, knew.
And it was only after, in 2013, that they sort of realized he had been convicted a few years earlier, and they flagged him as a risk, and he was no longer a client. They are now suing one of their former executives, a guy named Jeff Staley, who ran the private bank until 2013, saying that he should have known.
Yeah. And
so we'll
much
find out.
Yeah, you know, so much.
Jeff Staley's name was also one of the names that was mentioned in that book, in that black book.
Money involved here. Kaja, as part of this, and to kind of piggyback off what you just said there, JP Morgan does not have to admit any liability. Do we know, do the victims still consider this truly justice?
So, I mean, that's hard for me to answer because this was a Jane Doe. I don't know who this person is. But, you know, I think justice for most people, I mean, the Miami Herald has found dozens and dozens of people who claim that they were victims of Jeffrey Epstein, right? And I think for the most part, you know, you have to assume that what does justice mean? It sort of means that the people who wronged you admit what they did and they pay a price for it, right? We've seen a lot of money coming out of the woodworks lately, but we really haven't seen anybody accept any admission of wrongdoing, whether it's Jeffrey Epstein, who killed himself in jail and got a sweetheart deal in 2008 and then killed himself in jail. Ghislaine Maxwell, who's sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in his trafficking scheme, but, you know, she did not admit any guilt either.
All right, Kaja Whitehouse with Business Insider. We certainly appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about something here before I go to the article. Is this justice? Is this true accountability? Is $290 million a lot of money for JP Morgan? I don't think that is. Again, JP Morgan is huge. It's been around for a long, long time. A long, long time. One of the reasons why JP Morgan is as large as it is because during that financial crisis of 1917, it was actually the JP Morgan himself who decided to bail out the banks that were struggling in New York at that point in time. So if you hear someone say the phrase that JP Morgan kind of saved and rescued the federal government, they could be referring to that time in 1917 when he jumped in and did that. And because he added those banks, that's how JP Morgan was able to grow the way that it did. So he basically consumed the banks that were struggling at that point in time. Instead of saying, let me help you out, he said, let me just buy you for myself. And that's why one of the reasons why it's so much larger now. So $290 million, you have to understand, to JP Morgan is probably peanuts. So there was money that was paid. There was a settlement. Does that undo the trauma that these women have gone through? Does that undo the mental strain that they're going to have for the rest of their lives? Does it undo that? No, I don't think it does. And this reminds me of something else. When we talk about the bankers being held truly accountable, it reminds me of the 2008 housing crisis, where the banks were not held accountable. When Wall Street, when banks like Wells Fargo basically took homes from mainly elderly Black people, and Barack Obama, who was president at that time, chose to bail out Wall Street instead of bailing out the American people, they were not held accountable. What should have happened? All those bankers should have went to jail. All of them. They still got to keep. This makes no sense to me. All those bankers, you stole people's homes. When you steal someone's home, you steal a piece of their generational wealth. You understand that? You take a piece of their net worth. If you have home ownership, that's a significant piece of having net worth. And so there was no accountability there. Those people lost their homes and the bankers got off scot-free. And I said it back then, they all should have been held accountable. So here we go again with another bank. You have JP Morgan. Obviously, they should be held accountable. And $290 million to me is not being held truly accountable. That is peanuts for JP Morgan. And all of them involved, they should have to stand trial. Jamie Dimon, you should have to stand trial. Now, I know he was subpoenaed, but they should have to stand trial. I find it hard to believe that this just continues to go on because the banks are so powerful. So when people tell me I need to be mad at my neighbor, when people tell me I need to be mad at the person who has a different political ideology than me, no, you need to be mad at these banks. You need to be mad at the people who are at the top, who are actually, they have so much wealth and they refuse to distribute it in such a way that could actually help more people in this country. Those are the people that you need to be upset with, not your neighbor who's working at Dunkin' Donuts, who's just trying to get by. Now, I want to go into this article here. It says JP Morgan prepared to pay $290 million in settlement with Jeffrey Epstein victims. So this piece is important. It says the bank's litigation with the U.S. Virgin Islands in the Epstein matter remains. However, its claims against former executive Jess Staley, who was friends with Epstein, are also active. Last week, lawyers for the Epstein victim called Jane Doe 1 in documents asked the court to reopen JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon's deposition. So let's go on here. The announcement of the settlement came just hours before a judge ruled that the case in the U.S. District Court in Manhattan can proceed as a class action lawsuit. The bank did not include details about the agreement in that announcement. The person familiar with the deal requested anonymity. I don't know why I would say that word like that. Anonymity to discuss the details of the settlement. The parties in Jane Doe 1 versus JP Morgan Chase Bank have informed the court that they have reached an agreement in principle to settle the putative class action lawsuit related to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, which is subject to court approval. The parties believe this settlement is in the best interest of all parties. Really? The best interest of all parties would to make sure that those bankers are also arrested, in my opinion. This is a mess, especially the survivors who were victims of Epstein's terrible abuse. JP Morgan added. The settlement announcement came 1 month after Deutsche Bank, where Epstein became a client after he was forced out by JP Morgan in 2013, settled with Epstein victims for $75 million. JP Morgan's litigation with the U.S. Virgin Islands is ongoing. Monday's settlement stems from claims filed last year by an unnamed woman using the pseudonym Jane Doe that the bank knowingly benefited from and facilitated Epstein's sex trafficking operation. The woman who alleges she was assaulted and trafficked sued on behalf of a large number of other victims of that operation. We all now understand that Epstein's behavior was monstrous, and we all believe this settlement is in the best interest of all parties, especially survivors who suffered unimaginable abuse at the hands of this man. Yeah, at the hands of this man, but at the same time, the bank played right into it because you were continuing to fund it. You had business with him after he had already been convicted in 2008. Let's go on. Any association with him was a mistake and we regret it. That's not what Jamie Dimon said. That is not what Jamie Dimon said. Jamie Dimon said that he knew of Jeffrey Epstein, and he knew that he had already been convicted. Who's the CEO of JP Morgan? Jamie Dimon. Let's continue. We would have never continued to do business with him if we believed he was using our bank in any way to help commit heinous crimes. That's a lie. Brad Edwards, an attorney for the lead plaintiff in the case, lauded the enormously valuable support the Virgin Islands provided to Epstein's victims. We recognize the importance of the government's continued litigation against JP Morgan Chase to prevent future crimes. They really think that we are stupid. $290 million. Not even 300 million, by the way. $290 million is supposed to make things good again. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. Thank you so much. That helps me with the algo. But we have to continue to follow this. At least I'll continue to follow this because I feel like there's more news about this every week. And this is just crazy. Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan. How do we know other banks aren't participating in some type of act like this? How do we know? Maybe it's not Jeffrey Epstein anymore. Maybe it's someone else. I find it hard to believe that it was just this one person. My spidey senses are going off. Spidey senses. Going to go to some of the comments in the chat. Dwayne said, yes, they do, Sabby. They have nothing but contempt for us. Violin says, this is an insult to injury. Bad Cookie says, sadly, Sabby, the majority of Americans don't even care about Epstein. This is true, too. Thank you, Philly. Philly says, JP Morgan net income is $12.6 billion, up 52% first quarter 2023. $290 million. Give me a break. Nothing. Okay, we are moving on to our next story. I have news coming from Germany. I don't know if you've heard about this. Now, I told you a couple days ago that Germany is now in a recession. In the technical form, they are in a recession, which I warned you that could probably be a possibility because of the fact that Germany was heavily depending on that gas from Russia. Now, there is more news coming from Germany from their vice chancellor, who is actually warning that there could be an industry shutdown in Germany. Listen to this. I have an article first, and then I want to get to the video clip. Germany warns of industry shutdown if Russian gas stops flowing. Oh boy. Here we go. This just gets crazier every day. Germany may be forced to wind down or even switch off industrial capacity if Ukraine's gas transit agreement with Russia is not extended after it expires at the end of next year. This is coming from Economy Minister Robert Habeck. He's also their vice chancellor. Habeck, who is also the vice chancellor, issued the stark warning Monday at an economic conference in Eastern Germany, saying that the policymakers should avoid making the same mistake again of assuming that the economy will be unaffected without precautions to secure energy supplies. Now, this goes back to that Nord Stream pipeline. We all know that story. So obviously, when the Nord Stream pipeline blew up, this caused a problem for countries like Germany and also the UK. I explained to you how they had difficulty paying for like heating bills in the UK during the winter, right? So I explained about that. And I told you that Germany was dealing with this energy crisis as well because they were depending on that gas from Russia. He goes on to say, rules of sharing the burden of potential gas shortages in Eastern Europe would have to be respected, meaning that Germany would have to export gas there to offset the deficit, and manufacturers in Europe's biggest economy could have their supply restricted or cut. There is no secure scenario for how bad things will turn out. This is coming from Habek. Additional capacity, including a planned LNG terminal on Germany's north coast, that has provoked opposition from locals and environmental groups, will therefore be essential to maintain supply to both Eastern Germany and Eastern Europe, he said. And here's that part of that message in German. He goes on to say, despite the full-scale invasion of the country by Kremlin forces in February last year, Ukraine is still earning transit fees by allowing Russian gas to flow through its territory to countries like Austria, Slovakia, Italy, and Hungary. Even if some supply continues beyond 2024, it is unlikely that the current transit agreement will be extended under similar conditions, given the lack of political support. And that's according to the Center on Global Energy Policy, and that was published last week. Direct negotiations between Ukraine and Russia on the extension of the transit contract look highly implausible in the current environment. That's according to Anne and Tatiana, who are authors. Listen to this. Germany may be forced to wind down or even switch off industrial capacity if Ukraine's gas transit agreement with Russia isn't extended after it expires at the end of next year. Habek, who is also the vice chancellor, issued a stark warning on Monday at an economic conference in Eastern Germany, saying that policymakers should avoid making the same mistake again of assuming that the economy will be unaffected without precautions to secure energy supplies. Now, look at how bad this has become. I don't know about you guys, but based on what I've seen so far, seems like to me the countries that are suffering the most from the sanctions that were put on Russia, etc., doesn't seem like it's Russia. Look at what has happened in Germany. Germany is one of those countries where I consider them to have a strong economy. Look at what's happening to the UK. All of these other countries that had nothing to do with this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, they're basically thrown into turmoil, and they had nothing to do with it. You see, sometimes when you have actions towards one party, sometimes instead of that party suffering the most, it could be their neighbors that suffer the most. The ones who were not involved. Now, I don't know what to tell you, except for this should be a huge sign of what is to come. Germany just entered a recession. Now the vice chancellor is warning people that they may have to shut down industry in Germany. Do you know what happened to the people if they shut down industry? And more importantly, with everything that's going on, why aren't people protesting right now in Germany? Why aren't they? Where are the people? Where are the people? The way that people rose up in France over a pension reform. Why aren't people in the streets in Germany by the thousands right now? And there's more. Now, and this actually was reported today, Germany will export gas to Eastern Europe. Like, people are seriously in dire straits here. Listen to this.
Now, the West has been accusing Russia of blackmailing Europe over gas supplies ever since the Ukraine war started. And now Germany has said that it may have to shut down industrial capacity if Ukraine's gas transit agreement with Russia is not extended. The deal is expected to end by 2024, that is next year. German Economy Minister Robert Habeck says that lawmakers should avoid making the same mistake of assuming that the economy will be unaffected without any precautions to safeguard energy supplies. He also said that Germany will have to export gas to Eastern Europe in order to reduce the burden of potential gas shortages, while warning if certain steps are not taken, then manufacturers in Germany may face restriction or cut in their supply.
I'm just going to pause here for just a second. Okay, it is June, but listen to me. Winter is coming. Not to quote like Game of Thrones, but winter will be here before you know it. What is going to happen if this situation with the gas is not resolved by this winter? What's going to happen to Germany, to people there? And we already know what happened with the UK.
Even after Russia's bloody invasion of Ukraine, Kiev is still earning transit fees by allowing Russian gas to flow through its territory. The gas moves to countries like Austria, Slovakia, Italy, and Hungary. Now, according to a report by Center on Global Energy Policy, it is unlikely that the current transit agreement will be extended. And even if it's extended, the implementation of current conditions is difficult, mostly because of lack of political support.
This is a mess. So Germany seeks new gas transit deal. You know what I think? As many times as we've discussed a general strike, you know when I think a general strike in this country would happen? I think our best chance of seeing a general strike in the US, it's not just going to be people who are, frustrated and have hit rock bottom and just can't take it anymore in the US. I think our best chance of actually having a general strike in this country is when the entire international realm is also affected. It will be some type of international solidarity. This is just what I foresee. I foresee it won't just be Americans upset about inflation. I think it will be, Germans upset, French upset, the UK upset, people upset also in Eastern Europe. I think it'll be people upset in South America. I think it'll be people upset in Asia. I don't think it's just going to be the frustrations of the American people. I think that when it gets to a point in this world where all these countries have had enough and the people are suffering and struggling and they can't take it anymore, I think that is the time when you are going to see not just an American uprising of a general strike, but a global uprising of a general strike. That is the international working class solidarity that we've talked about before. I think that is what it is going to take. I don't think it'll just be us on our own. And when we talk about building an international workers movement, this is what we mean. Shama Sawant knows this very well when she talks about, even with Workers Strike Back, they know this very well, that you have to have that connection with the workers abroad, the workers in the global south, the workers in Asia. You have to have that international working class solidarity. And I think only then, that is when I think the American people will say, that's it. We're going to do a general strike. We've had enough. And it may not even be us to start it. It may start somewhere else first. And I think mainstream media is going to try to do their best to bury it. I think they'll try to do their best not to cover those stories, just like they tried to with France, but it got to the point where they had to because it went on for so long. Because they're not going to want us to get any ideas. If a general strike started and spread all throughout Europe, mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they are not going to want us to get ideas. So I think they would try to bury it as much as they can. But eventually, I think it will get to the point where they won't have a choice. They'll have to cover it because of how long it will last. So this is something that you need to think about when we talk about like a general strike, when we talk about everybody saying just, screw this, I'm not doing this anymore. The pressure has to come from somewhere. And I think it is through economic despair that is going to come. But I think it is going to be a global economic despair. Something to think about. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Anyone with a Hulu account here? I peeped this in the 2013 series, The Men Who Built America from the History Channel. They talked about the robber barons and their interpersonal relationship with Andrew Carnegie, Steel Rockefeller, Standard Oil, Cornelius Vanderbilt Railroad, Edison, Tesla, and John Pierpont Morgan, JP Morgan, from the House of Morgan. They show how he bailed out the government and seized control of stock. The federal government may be unwilling to enforce antitrust, but the state attorney generals have more power than the U.S. attorney generals. They can start revoking corporate charters using the 2015 Model Corporate Charter Revocation Act. Get this into the lexicon of your language, people. Know it like you know the back of your hand and pressure attorney generals to start doing this. Well said. And thank you for this tip, Snork. Many of our traffic stops, grocery stores, and U.S. factories use materials made in German factories like Siemens. A German shutdown could shut down the U.S. because we quit making these supplies here. Even most of our wind turbines may have to be shut down. Hope everyone heard that. Thank you so much for that, Snork. This is why I say foreign policy is domestic policy. This is why I say that. I'm going to go with some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Matt. Don't worry, inflation is transitory. Terry says the EU are U.S. lemmings and will do what they're told and the people will suffer for it. Isn't that sad, though? It's crazy. Notori! Dr. Cornel West announced this afternoon on Katie Halper's show that he is running within the Green Party primary. I know. Actually, I knew that was coming, but I couldn't say anything to you guys. I'm sorry. I've been keeping a secret. Yeah, I knew. Yeah, that's big news. I knew that was coming, but it wasn't my statement to make. So I said he'll announce it soon and that'll happen. But yeah, that is big, big news. Big news. Okay, let's get into our next story here about Tara Reade. So it was just like a week or two ago, we talked about Tara Reade. She went to Russia on vacation to promote her book. So Tara Reade wrote a book and she was given the option to actually make her book in multiple languages, right? So she went there to do that. And then at that point in time, she had been warned by Congressman Matt Gaetz that it would not be safe for her to return to the United States. Well, I have an update on that story, and I want you to hear this. Biden whistleblower Tara Reade files urgent appeal with the UN and seeks asylum in Russia. Let's go on here. Tara Reade, after more than 3 years of intimidation, harassment, and persecution by both individuals and institutions in the U.S. due to her allegations against Joe Biden, Ms. Reade has sought temporary asylum in the Russian Federation. Lawyers for Ms. Reade have made detailed submissions to the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression in Geneva. United Nations submission. Tara Reade's attorney has made a request for urgent appeal under the UN special procedures on the promotion and protection of the right to freedom of opinion and expression. The UN will review documents stating Mrs. Reade is a public interest whistleblower who is being unlawfully and politically persecuted by elements of the United States government aligned with President Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. Her right to freedom of opinion and expression has been and is being interdicted by politically weaponized law enforcement surveillance bolstered by a coordinated social media campaign, personal threats, and false accusations of treason, perjury, and espionage in the media. After careful consideration and evaluation of all options available to her, Ms. Reade made the decision to seek asylum in Russia based on concerns for her personal safety, well-being, and the protection of her rights. She has expressed her gratitude for the Russian government's willingness to provide her with a safe haven to ensure her security. Obviously, this was a tremendously difficult and painful decision, but circumstances forced it upon her. And this is actually her lawyer here, Rada Serling. And this is the tweet that she posted here. Biden whistleblower Tara Reade files urgent appeal with the UN. Now, I already know what some people are going to say. Some people are going to say, well, why did she go to Russia in the first place? Let me make something very clear. People should be free to travel where they want to travel. If you want to travel to Canada, to Mexico, if you want to travel to Brazil, wherever, you should be free to travel where you want to travel. And I've already heard people making this excuse. Like, don't even come at me with that, man. Don't come at me with that. Don't even do it. What they should be asking is, why is this country being demonized in such a way that if you even just go visit there, you're seen as a threat? That's the question that people should be asking. And when did we get to a point where we just vilify an entire country of people? You thought we would have learned our lesson from Iraq. You thought we would have learned that lesson from Afghanistan and all of the phobias that surrounded that with Muslim people. You thought we would have learned our lesson after September 11 and all of the rhetoric that I heard from Americans about people who are from those regions. And all this shows me is that we haven't learned a damn thing. You can change the country. It doesn't matter. If the State Department tells you that country is your enemy, that is what Americans are brainwashed to believe. And that is what most of them do believe. And this just proves it. I've heard Russophobia my whole life. Even when I was a kid, the Rocky series, Rocky IV. Rocky IV, he had to go up against, God, I forget his name, Drago. I think his name was Drago. He had to face Drago. Big, strong dude. And he was Russian, right? So, of course, they made this character to be cold and mean. And he beat his friend up so bad in the ring that he killed him. And no fear, heartless. Could have been any country. But it was Russia. Hollywood did that. Because you see, Hollywood has this sense to follow the State Department talking points as well. They also put fear into people. If it wasn't Rocky, it was a made-for-TV movie. It was a show. Even Stranger Things does it. And a lot of people like that show. Whenever you see them, especially in Hollywood, they talk about Russia. It's always this this representation of this place that it's always snowing and it's cold and you're in the middle of Siberia and there's hardly any people around and everyone just sits around and just drinks vodka and everyone's mean and angry. One of my favorite shows, Green Arrow, also did the same thing. Arrow did the same thing. So I've seen it my whole life. This is not new to me. The point is that when you have all these forces working together, you have the State Department, you got the president, you have the congressmen and women, then you got the media on your side, then you also have Hollywood participating in this. If you don't stop and think for yourself and do your own research, it is very easy to fall into that trap and become brainwashed and assume that you should just resent those people because Hollywood told you to. That's how it works. Now, Tara Reade actually was on Rising recently talking about her situation. So I want to go ahead and play a clip from this. She starts off in the beginning talking about how she has been attacked, and not even just her, but her family members.
Thanks for having us. It's our pleasure, of course, to be able to have this conversation with you. Tara, let's start by talking about how you feel your move to Russia has been mischaracterized. You know, if this is not a defection, what is it, and what prompted the move, this threat to your safety?
Well, I think, Bree, you know, you were kind of front and center witness, as was Robbie, to how I was treated by the mainstream corporate media when I came forward in 2019 and 2020. Basically, I was just out the gate, I was called a Russian asset. I had no ties to Russia. I had no affiliations. And then through 2020, I was attacked. I had personal physical attacks to my safety, to my family. You know, I was threatened with my life. I had a break-in. My daughter's house was broken into. She was threatened. She had to get a restraining order. My horse was being threatened to kidnap. I mean, it was a mess all of 2020. I couldn't get work. People would tell me that I was a security risk. And so I finally got a job with RT doing some op-eds, and I did not conceal it. I was very open about it, talked about, you know, working at RT. It wasn't very much money. And then I went forward with that, and still continued to get hassled and just called a Russian agent and all these horrible things. And eventually, my book came out in 2020 in COVID, and many authors had trouble. And on top of mine was suppressed. And as you have reported out, the FBI and DOJ worked on suppressing people on Twitter and other social media. On Facebook, for instance, my name in 2020, Tara Reade, was called election interference. So they kept deflecting the conversation from the allegations I made of being raped in 1993 by Joe Biden when I worked for him, and no Russians were present. And coming forward about that, they kept trying to deflect the conversation, and I got caught up in that Russian sort of narrative. So recently, my book was being offered to have international translation, and that's what brought me to Moscow. And I went ahead and went to Moscow. While I was there, I had several conversations with people who are experts in the field who gave me a warning that they were very concerned about my safety.
Yeah, could you elaborate on that to whatever extent you're possible? Were the people warning you that you were in trouble? Was it Russian people or people back in the States?
It was American. It was Americans. Yeah.
Law enforcement.
It was Americans that would know. It was Americans that would know. And bear in mind too, you know, the physical threats already have happened, and they started amping up again in 2023. And I don't know if you saw the viral tweet where I said, you know, look, I'm not suicidal. I'm not going to have an accident. That was because I was getting physically targeted again. And it was during that time I was talking to Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and did an interview, and I was set to testify. So that was all happening simultaneously. So it was based on that, but also they gave me a specific warning about a possible Interpol red notice, which I don't know international law, and I think Rada could speak more eloquently and describe what that means, but it was, unsettling. I talked with Matt Gaetz, and he didn't give me advice, he gave me information. He basically said, Tara, I'm concerned for your physical safety.
So and that's who you're
So there you go. And I think, hopefully someone will have a conversation with Matt Gaetz at some point or another. I don't know if Rising has reached out, but hopefully there'll be a conversation with him to ask him, why did he make that statement? Like, hopefully there will be a conversation. I don't even know how much he can say or if he can discuss it or not. But I mean, if someone told you, I'm concerned for your safety if you return back to the States, like, I mean, what would you think? Well, how would you guys feel? I mean, I'm thinking to myself, like, she probably would have been arrested on site, like the moment she stepped foot in this country.
Referring to is political elected representatives who have warned you about your safety.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, Raja, maybe you want to jump in here and elaborate on exactly what the nature of that threat of the Interpol report. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tara received information from former intelligence or members of the community that she was either her life may have been at risk and definitely her freedom, and that she may have been reported to the Interpol Red Notice database, which, if she had left Russia at that time, would have likely led to her arrest en route back to the US in Turkey, where they could have kept her indefinitely, essentially, facing unknown charges or unknown allegations. Now, Interpol is regularly used by authoritarian states as a means to harass people abroad, to have them arrested and subject to extradition proceedings, even if that country knows that they're not going to win. So it could definitely lead to her arrest. So we've already lodged filings with Interpol to find out if she's on the database. And if she is, I've also lodged preemptive documents that would prevent them, hopefully, from accepting a notice from the US in the future. Now, if Tara had returned to the US, she was extremely concerned that she would be detained potentially until after the next election.
So let's just pause here for just a second. You know what I just saw recently? The Monica Lewinsky story. It's actually on Hulu. It's a part of American Crime Story or True American Crime Story. They did the one about O.J. Simpson. I don't know if you guys saw that. I saw that one, but it's called Impeachment, and I'm not finished yet. I still have one more episode to go, but it just brought back memories. Right now, obviously, different situation from Tara and Monica. Monica's situation was obviously a consensual relationship. Tara Reade's was not. But you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the way, and particularly the way the women reacted towards Monica Lewinsky once the story broke. There were a lot of women mad at her, calling her a homewrecker, when I felt like more people should have been upset at former President Bill Clinton, considering the fact that he was much older than her. She was an intern, and he was the president of the United States. Whether it was consensual or not, he knew better. And it wasn't the first time. Obviously, there had been other things came up along the way, right? That he had women coming in and out of his office when he was governor of Arkansas. But the thing I think we need to think about is that there seems to be this tendency for the American people, for whatever reason, and a lot of times it comes from the women, to be angry at the woman instead of being angry at the man. And I don't know why that happens, but we need to change that way of thinking in this country. We really do.
I want to make sure I understand. Do you have any sense of what charges, what basis they would have retained Tara? And moreover, is the feeling that there could not have been a direct flight back to the United States, that the concern was being interceded in Turkey or wherever else a layover would have happened?
There was no direct flight back to the US, so she would have to go via a third-party country where she could have been detained. Alternatively, she could be detained in the US under, it could be anything. These days, we've seen the way that the authorities have weaponized the justice system there for political gain. So they may have arrested her with some allegation that she is a Russian agent or that she has, she's a domestic terrorist or anything to that effect.
Or they could say something like you had an unpaid parking ticket. They can get people these ways. There was a whole sting operation a couple years ago. They may still do this a couple years ago where they used to find a way to basically hold dads accountable that weren't paying child support. And what they would do is they would try to get them with things like you have an unpaid parking ticket, so you have to come in to settle this, or you won these free tickets to this baseball game, and then they'd get them all there and then they book them. They can come up with anything. You had unpaid parking ticket, or you owe this money, or you owe that. Any little thing to get you in the room.
They don't really need to provide that evidence in order to detain her for lengthy periods of time. So I think anyone, when faced with that risk, would say, do I really want to go back right now? Or do I want to stay here and see whether my lawyers can get to the bottom of it, whether I can perhaps be assured protection when I testify at Congress about this very weaponization and about what happened with Joe Biden in the 90s. And I think at this point, Tara had really no option but to stay in Russia.
So it's more, when you describe feeling being explicitly warned that you would not necessarily be safe returning to the country. It's not. The safety aspect of it is more that government forces, either on your way back to the U.S. or even at the U.S., you have some sense that they might be after you, not like your life is in danger because a third party or something is coming to kill you or something. It's actually a government threat of arrest and detention.
It's both, actually. I've been physically targeted, Robbie. And, the other day, one of the FBI whistleblowers, the FBI said to a congresswoman, they couldn't guarantee that whistleblower wouldn't be killed. He was testifying about the bribery case. So these are very serious. I mean, I've been targeted physically several times. I don't know by who. I made police reports like one does. I actually went to federal law enforcement when it first happened in 2020, not knowing that they were actually going after me. And also remember that I have a sealed case that we still don't know what it is, with a grand jury impaneled, and it's been sealed for 3 years, and they can indict on whatever it is at any time.
I think, Tara,
let me go ahead and pause here for just a second. I saw this comment, The View, they made fun of her. What did I tell you guys? It's usually the women. That show is so ridiculous. And Sunny and her crazy lame ass.
Just to try to raise, I think, some of the questions that more skeptical audience members might have. They might ask, well, given that you have been the victim of some threats or attacks in the past, and that so much of that centered around the events of 2020 and people who were frustrated that you raising your allegations at that time, and of course you had raised them many, many years in advance, but the allegations coming up at that point was going to threaten Joe Biden's presidential chances, et cetera. Given that that was kind of the temporal locus of all of that activity, why now do you feel as though there is a level of threat that justifies or might require you to extend your time in Russia? And also, why Russia as opposed to some other countries, given the subtext of what it means to stay in Russia in America's current political climate?
Well, to answer your question fully, I was here for 7 days, right? I mean, I literally only packed 7 days worth of clothes, so I don't even have a coat. And I had been so happy because I got this book, deal arranged where I was having my book translated and and then another additional book accepted for next September. So I was thinking I could go back and forth between America and Russia. I've just never bought into the Russophobia and the narrative because, as you know, Bria, most of it has been like the Steele dossier was turned over. It was false. It was fake. All of this has been fake. I mean, Russia is a capitalistic country like the United States. They don't want to be our enemy. We're not in a war officially with them. So why are they considered, why are they calling it defection or an enemy nation? So really what this is more about, it's not even about that. It's more about, I just wanted to testify before Congress about Joe Biden and what happened in 1993. And I have been terrorized and marginalized to the point where I literally sought sanctuary, because for me to fly home could have meant me walking into a jail cell where, as you know, the new laws allow them to hold people for several months without charges and without counsel. So
let me pause there for a second. This is a good point from Lucretia. The word defection sounds like a military word. And why do we do with countries that don't do anything for us, or worse, does something actively to us? Yeah. So that's another thing that has been raised, that she defected. Yeah, that is a military term. She did not defect. She went there because she had that opportunity to make it so that her book could be translated into several different languages. She was not moving there. She was just going there for that, and then was planning on coming back to the US. And then that's when she got the call that you better not come back here because it would not be safe for you. So that's why she's still there. Thank you for the super chat, Sam. Hi, Sab. How are you? Just finished class with JB. Awesome. Yeah, I heard JB's taking a Marxist class. But that's the piece that, just for people to really understand. Like, she didn't pack up one day and say, I'm moving to Russia. She went there to promote that book and to have it translated into different languages. And then she got that message from Matt Gaetz.
that would have been very convenient for Joe Biden, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we have, I've commented on the show many times about how I believe you were treated so differently from other people who made Me Too accusations. In the reception you got from the mainstream media, a kind of automatic skepticism that was just not extended to so many of these other instances where it was automatic belief, and it has to be, the burden is on to disprove it, where in your case it seemed like the media was operating in a more, well, no, the burden is on her to prove it, we're not going to automatically believe it.
That's right. And I do have to say too that it was Me Too and it was Believe All Women, unless the person that you are accusing is a part of the Democratic Party. Alyssa Milano, Time's Up, all of them that said that they were totally fine with that, unless the person was a part of the Democratic Party, the person that you were accusing. And I have to say, I gave a shout out on Twitter to Bree and Robbie for bringing Tara Reade on for people to be able to hear her story. Because for those of you who are not aware, some people in independent media are afraid to talk to Tara Reade. They're afraid to bring her on. And she's been snubbed by a lot of people. So I think, the fact that you have someone like Bree, who was a part of the Bernie Sanders campaign, and Tara Reade has stated publicly that she contacted Bernie Sanders and she contacted AOC and heard nothing from them in reference to the situation that she had. I think it takes courage to still bring her in and hear what she has to say, knowing that you were a part of this campaign, and even Bernie Sanders himself didn't want to hear what Tara Reade had to say. So I think that takes guts. But I sincerely hope that this situation is resolved soon. Tara Reade's not alone. There are other people who can't come back here. So something has to change here. Something has to change. But, I wish her all the best. And I'm going to try to see if I can record with her next week, because she's on Russia time. So she wouldn't be able to come on in the evening anymore. And she's been on here multiple times. But to see if I can do an update with her to see how things are going, I don't think that Tara Reade wants to be away from like her family. She's a mom, like her horses or anything like that. Like, she's kind of just stuck there right now. It's crazy. Crazy. Dana says, compare the treatment of Christine Blasey Ford and Tara Reade. Yep. Yes, because the individual that Christine was accusing, Brett Kavanaugh, was a Republican. And all Tara Reade, for the longest time was asking for was just her day to testify in Congress. And it shouldn't even have gone on this long. This is ridiculous. So yeah, we wish her the best. Please send her some love and support her way. Okay. We are getting into this Glenn Greenwald and RFK Jr. story. Now, I have 3 clips I'm going to show from this. Yes, 3 clips I'm going to show from this because Glenn Greenwald has the full interview on Rumble, but on Twitter, he clipped it. And so there's different clips on, not Twitter, on YouTube, he clipped it. So there's different clips on YouTube, but the full length video is on Rumble. So just FYI, right? The first topic that we're going to dive into is Russiagate. Because for those who are not aware, apparently RFK Jr. did believe the Russiagate, theory that, Trump had colluded with like Russia. Apparently he has changed his view on that now. And I want to get into that topic first. And they kind of lead into like the Ukraine war. But I was kind of surprised with this interview because, like I said, this is the first interview I've seen RFK Jr. do where I felt there were certain parts where he just appeared to be uncomfortable. I'm not faulting Glenn Greenwald or anything like that. I just think it was obvious to me there were some questions that I think made him a little bit uncomfortable. And I think you'll see that. But let's get into the Russiagate topic first.
You seem to me to be a kind of vehement supporter of Russiagate. Your campaign contacted me, said they thought that was an unfair characterization. I went back and looked and concluded that at least it was excessive. And I went on the air a couple days later and kind of withdrew that characterization and said there's no need for me to kind of try and describe his views because he's going to be here and I can ask him. So here you are. In terms of this Russiagate narrative that really dominated our politics for 5 or 6 years, and the 2 prongs of it were that the Trump campaign collaborated with the Kremlin to hack into the DNC emails and manipulate the outcome of the 2016 election. And the subsidiary claim was that Trump was some sort of a puppet of Vladimir Putin or controlled by the Kremlin due to blackmail and other leverage. What is your view now about the veracity of those 2 claims?
Well, I think that there was a period, which you're correct about, that I just accepted the mainstream narrative. And, part of that is just my own fault of not being skeptical about it. And part of it also may have been just my natal, bias against Donald Trump, which I was like most Democrats, I was probably just happy to hear anything that confirmed my own notion of Donald Trump. The first time that I had any kind of inkling that that narrative may not be complete or accurate was when I was having dinner with Oliver Stone. And Oliver Stone lives about a half mile from where I live. And he had Cheryl and I for dinner one night, and with his son, Sean, who was a podcaster and a political critic. And the 2 of them, I don't know how it came up, but maybe one of us, Cheryl, I mentioned it, but he scoffed in a way that was very dismissive, and then had a sort of a brief dialogue about a brief monologue about how there was nothing to that story. And it seemed to me, and of course you're with Oliver Stone, so you think, well, he's a guy who's embracing fringe theories anyway, and you just don't know. But it put the first seed of doubt into my head. And then in 2020, when people started criticizing, including myself, the methodology that was being used to prove the COVID vaccines, I all of a sudden started seeing these propaganda tropes, or these tropes that were appearing all the time, saying anybody who criticizes vaccines is probably a Russian bot or a Russian stooge. So then I started saying, oh, okay, so here's what they're doing. And it, it may be orchestrated. And then as the I think at that point I was open to hearing a different story. And then I started seeing the piles of evidence, but I still was neutral on it. I mean, in my mind, the jury was out on this stuff until I saw, the recent disclosures, the Durham report, et cetera, that showed that that it makes it look like the entire thing was fabricated from whole cloth.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was debunked. It was debunked. Let me tell you something, you guys. I actually never really fell for Russiagate. Part of the reason had to do with the fact that Rachel Maddow was heavily pushing it. Just being honest, I honestly don't think most Americans cared about that or believed that or were paying attention to it. I don't think most people were actually like, oh no, he might be in the mix with Russia. No, I just, yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons I focused on it so much was not necessarily because I thought it was an unfair and baseless conspiracy theory that was being propagated by the U.S. security state and the corporate media, which I do think it was. I thought the much more important implication was it was essentially making it so that it was virtually criminalized, inherently so, for American officials to talk to Russian officials. Michael Flynn almost went to prison for calling the Russian ambassador to talk about U.S.-Russian relations. People were petrified of having conversations with Russians because of fear that it would be used to suggest they were sort of a Kremlin loyalist or a traitor. When I look now at the kind of fervor, the anti-Russian fervor that's driving the war in Ukraine, to me, a lot of it seems to have come from this kind of anti-Russian sentiment that Democrats in particular were encouraged to feed on for all these years as part of Russiagate, going back to 2016 when they blamed Russia rather than the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton for her defeat. I'm wondering if that's something that concerns you, this idea that so many Americans are being taught to view the Russians kind of the way we looked at them in the Cold War as this grave existential threat to the United States, and that in part is what is driving what you described as this bellicose mindset toward Moscow.
The answer to your question is yes. Now I see in some way the Ukraine war, that I see a lot of those, that the Russian propaganda tropes that we were being force fed through the mainstream media, and always, with the source to a U.S. intelligence agent, an unnamed U.S. intelligence agency, which is always suspect. And usually coming out of the Washington Post and the New York Times, which, have these deep almost Mockingbird-like relationships with the U.S. intelligence agencies. And now I see that as kind of the runway to the Ukraine war, that it was all, that we were being propagandized to see the Russians as an existential enemy.
Let me ask you about Ukraine. Just one more question, which is, I'm going
to get to that question for just a second, but I do just want to say, at least he was one of those people that came around on the issue. There are still some people who still Russiagate, but at least he was one of those people that realized, hey, I was wrong about this. So he did come around. Let's see if he can come around on some other issues. We're getting into the Ukraine discussion now.
You before criticized President Biden the way a lot of people have, that it seems very striking. There's no effort, seemingly, to try and end this war diplomatically. If anything, there seems to be an attempt on the United States to block diplomatic efforts to end this war. Do you think it would have been possible to diplomatically avert the war beforehand or to end it now? And if so, how would you do that?
Yeah, I think it can be ended immediately. To me, it seems clear that Putin did not want this war, that he didn't, even in, when the Donbass voted 90-10 to join Russia, Putin didn't want them. Putin said, no, you stay in Ukraine. And then, he was part of the proposal of the Minsk Accords, which would have left Donbass part of Ukraine and an autonomous region so that they could protect their Russian ethnic citizens who were then being murdered by the Azov battalion and by the Ukrainian government, and that they could continue to practice their own language and culture. And but that, I think that's the basis for a peace agreement. And the key part of the Minsk Accords was that NATO would agree permanently, we are not going into the Ukraine.
Yep.
Which is an understandable request from Russia, who has been invaded 3 times through the Ukraine. The last time in 41, 1 out of every 7 Russians was killed. And 1/3 of the Russians Russia was reduced to rubble. So of course they don't want an enemy military in charge of the Ukraine, and they've made that clear since 1992.
See, this is the piece that most people don't mention, by the way, guys. Most people don't mention that part that what he just mentioned about how Russia has also been invaded.
They took the wall down, and the one request they made, they said, you can put NATO troops in United Germany. We will withdraw 400,000 troops from United Germany, but do not make us a promise. You will not move NATO to the east. And we promised them, we won't move it 1 inch to the east. Well, we moved it 1,000 miles to the east into 14 new countries, and now we've surrounded and encircled the Russians, and we're treating them like the enemy. And of course, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then, Glenn, the clear evidence that the United States was involved in the 2014 coup that removed Viktor Yanukovych's government, which is a government, Ukrainian government that was duly elected by the Ukrainian people, and that we regarded as too sympathetic to the government of Russia. And so, we pumped $5 billion into the project of overthrowing that government. And then
it's something that the U.S. continues to do in other countries as well. And what did I tell you? It always has some involvement with the U.S. Sometimes you have to go back a couple of years, but you go back a couple of years, you look, the U.S. was definitely involved. And I think more people need to mention that. A lot of times, even mainstream media, they don't want to mention that part. They just want to make it seem like one day Vladimir Putin woke up and said, fuck these hoes. I'm going to go out here and just dive into this country and take things back, do what I want, and take this region and take that region. That's what they make it seem like, right? So I think it's important that you mention that piece. Now, the other part about this particular discussion, notice that he said, I think it could be ended immediately. Dr. West said the same thing. Oh, we'd call for ceasefire and peace on day 1. Marianne's response was a little bit different in the interview that she had with Kim Iverson. So I think, again, when it comes to this particular issue, I do think RFK Jr. and Dr. West do have this correct. And that's why I asked Dr. West, is there any possibility that he could see maybe collaborating with RFK Jr. on issues where they do agree, like the anti-war issue? Yes, I said that. I'm sorry, JB. Putin woke up one day and was like, fuck these hoes. Oh, man, I haven't used that term in a long time.
Well, our own government, which is Victoria Nuland, as we have her take on the phone, picking the new cabinet. And of course, the Russians aren't going to like that too much. Ukraine is 400 miles from Moscow. And we've already been installing missile systems, Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland that are nuclear capable. When my uncle, in 1962, when the Russians did that to us in Cuba, we would have invaded them. So of course we would invade them today.
Okay, that is the first segment that I wanted to show you. So I think, he realized he got Russiagate wrong. He said, learned from that. I think his position on the Ukraine war, I think he gets that right, and he wants to end it immediately. Now we're moving on to a different topic. Take a deep breath. If you need to stretch, grab some popcorn, a cup of tea, now might be the time to do that. This topic is Israel-Palestine. So brace yourself for this one. There is a lot of back and forth here between Glenn Greenwald and RFK Jr. You guys, if you've been watching me for a while, you know I do not agree with his position in reference to Israel and Palestine. But what I liked about this approach here is I felt like Glenn was trying to get him to see the error of his ways, and so to speak, by making the comparison to Ukraine, which he'll get into. So I think that was a good idea that Glenn Greenwald did. And I think that, hopefully RFK Jr. can learn from this. I still want to see him have this conversation with Max Blumenthal, though. I still do, So here we go.
Let me ask you about a recent controversy in which you found yourself, more as a window to understand some of your broader views, which was the praise you originally offered for Roger Waters with regard to his stance on both Ukraine, which he is opposed to in terms of the U.S. proxy war, as well as COVID. He was questioning a lot of the same orthodoxies you were. And then you ended up deleting that tweet where you praised him and made clear that the reason was because he had held views on Israel and Palestine that you didn't share. I want to ask you about the specific kind of divergencies that you have with him on that question. But before I get into that, why was it necessary for you to delete your praise for Roger Waters just because you disagree with him on Israel? Can't you praise him on Ukraine and COVID and then at the same time say, but there are other issues, including Israel, where I have differences? Why did you delete the praise entirely?
That's the same question I have. It's like, notice how uncomfortable he looks here. Look, watch this. Watch this, watch.
Why was it necessary for you to delete your praise for Roger Waters just because you disagree with him on Israel? Can't you praise him on Ukraine and COVID and then at the same time say, but there are other issues, including Israel, where I have differences? Why did you delete the praise entirely?
You see that? So keep your eye on RFK Jr. He doesn't look comfortable here, but here we go.
Well, first of all, the reasons that I praised him was because of his position on the war, his position on COVID, which I thought was very courageous at a time when nobody, and also his position on Julian Assange.
Right.
I disagree, I would say fiercely, with his criticism of Israel. And I'm not, there are enough people who characterize those political differences anti-Semitic that me endorsing him felt like I was buying into that, into something that was abhorrent to me. I really disagree.
What people? See, this is the piece I wanted to know when he said people look at this as who? Who said something?
Of Israel, and I'm not, there are enough people who characterize those political differences anti-Semitic that me endorsing him felt like I was buying into that, into something that was abhorrent to me.
Who felt like RFK Jr. was buying into that because he had that tweet where he supported, Roger Waters? Who? Where did that come from? See, this is the question. I'm nosy, but then also like, who had a problem with it? Did lobbyists have a problem with it? Did donors have a problem with it? That's what Sabby is curious about.
I really disagree with I think Roger, like many critics of it, first of all, people who criticize Israeli policy should not be characterized as anti-Semitic. But people who apply a different standard to judging Israel than they would to judging an Arab country, I think then that you've crossed a line there. And I do think that Roger does that. I've now looked at some of his stuff, and I think, like I said, I do not think people who criticize that people who criticize Israel policies should not be called anti-Semitic. But I do think that many people are applying, who are Israel's critics, are applying a double standard.
So just to be clear, when you were interviewed by Crystal Ball on Breaking Points, it became kind of a very talked about interview, particularly the part where she was disagreeing with you about your view on vaccines. We did a segment on this show talking about that interview, and my main critique with her, and she's a friend of mine, was that I didn't have a problem with her disagreeing with your views on vaccines. Lots of people do. She described it, though, as a red line, which seemed to me her way of saying, I don't disagree with you here, but you're so far beyond the pale about an issue that I regard as so sacred that the fact that that I disagree with you here means you're basically off limits, like you're radioactive, you're not susceptible to consideration for support no matter what, in a way that, say, Joe Biden wouldn't be. That's the impression I got when you didn't just disagree with Roger Waters on Israel, but deleted the praise, namely, doesn't matter how much I agree with him, I regard him as a person who's so radioactive that he should never be praised under any circumstances because of his view on Israel. That's a red line for me. Is that essentially what motivated your deletion and how you view people like Roger Waters and those who share his views on Israel?
Body language is important to me. It's something that I tend to pay attention to. While this has no volume, watch RFK Jr.'s body language. Watch this. Here we go. So right now, he's chill, praised under any circumstance because of his view on, see, watch this, the ear and the shift. You see that? I told you I pay attention to body language.
No, not at all. In fact, I continue to admire Roger Waters for his positions on, for his courageous positions on the Ukraine, on Julian Assange, on COVID. But because of that issue is so sensitive and radioactive to people, I did not want to leave any opportunity for people to misunderstand. Since apparently, I guess, as I understand it now, he's more well known for his anti-Israel position than probably any other position.
I would say that Roger Waters is more well known as a member of Pink Floyd. Most people, especially those not following politics at all, don't know this. Like, it just, I'm sorry. But the thing is that's who most people know Roger Waters for. They know him for being a member of Pink Floyd. Not about his political views, like his view on Israel, Palestine, or his view on this war, Russia, Ukraine. Most people, especially those that are not tuned into politics, aren't paying attention to any of that. So that I think that RFK Jr. is making this bigger than what it actually is. He's making it seem like it's bigger than what it is. Just saying. Let me put it to you this way. People in the hood have no idea this shit is happening, okay? I'm just telling you right now. If I were to reach out to family members of mine and I say, hey, did you know that they're coming after Roger Waters because da-da-da? First response we get, Pink Floyd? That's what they know. Most people aren't even following this.
And so praising him without making really clear what I was praising him for, and that I did not buy into his other stuff, was a source of confusion to people that I did not want to leave up there.
Fair enough. I mean, I think the reason why he's most known for that is sometimes the same reason you're most known for your views on vaccines, even though you have views on lots of other things, which is because a lot of times people look for ways to take establishment critics and kind of render them radioactive by focusing on the one issue they know people will be most hostile to. But let me ask you about the substance of the Israel position. You alluded to the fact that your family had long been supporters of Israel. That was kind of the standard Democratic Party position for a long time, still is. At the same time, Israel has clearly changed over the years. The demographic shifts in the population have made it a much more religious society, more right-wing society. And I think any honest observer in the region or anywhere acknowledges that a two-state solution, the kind of way that people justify defending Israel, is now essentially impossible. There's way too many settlements in the West Bank, and those people are never moving, those settlers. You'd need a civil war between the government and Israel to do it. From the position of someone who's running for U.S. president, would your view be that the U.S. should continue to provide billions of dollars every year in aid to Israel unconditionally, meaning no matter how they treat the Palestinians, no matter what it is that they become politically, or would you condition that aid on them treating the Palestinians more humanely and more fairly?
Yeah, I mean, that's a long and complex question. And I've been to Israel. I've visited specifically Palestinian settlements within Israel and in, however you want to call it, West Bank or Judea and Samaria. I've been visited. I've spoken with government officials there. I understand that that Palestinians are mistreated in Israel. I've seen, the water allocations that were very, very unfairly allocated to the new settlements rather than to traditional settlements that have been around in some cases for hundreds of years.
It's not even just mistreatment, though. Palestinians have been beaten. They've been dragged out of their homes. They've been killed. Don't forget the Palestinian journalist that was killed. Like, it's not even just, I don't even want to use the term mistreatment because it just, that's vague to me. Like, I want you to say specifically what is happening to the Palestinian people. They're being beaten, some of them being tortured, some of them being killed, dragged out of their homes, people taking their homes and saying, you don't live here anymore, get out, and this is mine. So I think, just saying mistreated, that's just such a general term, and that can mean different things to different people, especially for people who are not familiar with everything that's happening over there to the Palestinian people.
In terms of the evolution, I think everything has a historical context in Israel. And if you look at why we don't have a two-state solution in Israel, which everybody now says they want, but both in 1947 and 1948.
And that's not true. Everybody is not saying they want a two-state solution. That's the thing.
1947, 1948, and then again in 2001, it was the Palestinian leadership that walked away from a two-state solution and pledged itself to the destruction of the Jewish people. Oh, and that, that's a very, very clear history. And I think at a time when they had a very, very generous solution on the table. Now,
So it's the Palestinians' fault? Does anybody notice what's wrong with the rhetoric here?
The thing I say is Israel is a democracy, but it's a flawed democracy, just like the United States. But if I was a dissident Arab Palestinian, would I rather be a dissident in Israel or in Saudi Arabia or Oman or Qatar or any other Arab nation? If you're a dissident, you get up in the middle of the public square and denounce the government. Where would you rather be? You'd rather be in Israel. It's the only place you're not going to get in trouble. And that does not mean that it's a perfect democracy. It isn't. It's very, very flawed. And I do not, I differ vociferously with the views of the right-wing, religious right-wing groups that have in many ways been dictating policy in Israel over the last few years. I think part of the responsibility of the United States is to try to find a path to justice for the Palestinians. But on all these issues, if you live on any of these other countries.
I'm sorry, I have to comment on the town square part where he says, get up and stand up in front of the town square and tell them that you'd rather be in Israel. Do you want these people to be killed? Like, I don't understand this. Like, no, if anything, a lot of them are trying to be as less visible as possible. RFK Jr. is like, well, get up and stand in front of the town square and say, I'd rather live here. It's like, obviously, they know that. They know they want to be there. They don't want them there. They don't want them there. I don't know how else to say it. Like, I just really don't. Like, to me, this is bizarre. Like, I can't get this out of my head right now that he thinks it's just that simple. And he would even say that.
You're gay, for example. You can be killed for that. Israel is the only place where you have freedom. If you're transvestite, if you have other kind of dissident views, you'd much rather be in Israel than any other place.
I get that argument,
right, but apparently it's not free to certain people though. It's not free for the Palestinians. It's not free for the Ethiopian Jews, and I've shown you videos about how they're being treated in Israel as well. It's not. It's like you have this freedom for certain people. For certain people, just like same as like the United States. At one point in time before I was born, there were certain laws in this country and certain freedoms for certain people, and not even just racially. Even when you look at gender, there were certain laws, certain things in this country that at one point in time women could not do. So the whole thing to me is just like, yeah, there's freedoms, but they're for certain people. So he brought up the LGBTQ stance. I don't know if he thought like that would go well with, I don't know what he's thinking. He's like, let me throw this in for an example. Glenn would understand. And I'm just like, no.
Go ahead. You can finish. Well, I just wanted to ask you because
Israel, and we need to have the same standard for judging Israel as we judge other Arab countries. We should, and Israel is.
Who are we giving money to? RFK Jr.? Who's the money going to?
It's going into the West Bank and killing children. It's never doing that deliberately. Never. And nobody has ever said it is.
Well, a lot of people have.
So it's an accident. So what about the Palestinian journalist? I mean, I told you his view on this issue was not good, but I think in this particular interview, it's revealed even more.
A lot of people have said it. A lot of people have said it is. But let me just ask you, because I just want to focus the.
In all of those other countries, it is the deliberate policy of those countries to attack and target civilians and to kill them.
Okay, so let me just.
And I usually don't like people interrupt, but I understand why he's interrupting here. Just because it is not a specific policy, just because it's not written into law, does not mean it is not happening intentionally. Come on, man. Like we got to think about this. RFK Jr. was born way before I was. We got to remember that RFK Jr. grew up in a time in this country. Let me think back. If he's 70s, 70s. Okay, yeah. He grew up in a time during the time in this country when parts of the country were still segregated by law, but then there were parts of the country that were segregated not by law, but those things were still being implemented. It didn't have to be a policy written down. What is it? Really? Come on, man. Like, even going back to the Kennedy family, there was a time in this country where you had Klansmen hanging Black people. Now, it wasn't written in policy, but it still happened. And they were getting away with this shit. So come on, you can get away with it. It doesn't have to be a policy. Give me a break. I can't.
I just want to focus the question, though, because you have the kind of abstract question that you're talking about, which is who's better, Israel or Saudi Arabia? And I don't think anybody would doubt you'd rather live in Israel than Saudi Arabia if that's, the choice. Just like people say, I'd rather live in Ukraine than Russia. Ukraine seems more democratic to me than Russia. But when it comes to Ukraine, I've heard you making the argument that even though Ukraine might be our ally, even though they might be more democratic than Russia, we have so many people that you speak eloquently about suffering here at home that this is a war we can't afford. So if you were to go around the United States, as you're already doing and will continue to do, and the question is not who's better, the Israeli or the Palestinians. The question is, why are we in the United States transferring billions of dollars of aid each year to a country, Israel, whose citizens in a lot of ways enjoy better standards of living than a lot of the ways American citizens live? What is your argument for why we should send so much money to Israel but not to Ukraine?
Here we go.
Well, I mean, historically, that argument has been that Israel is a model democracy in the Mideast. It's the only democracy in the Mideast. And as a democracy, it's a model for peacekeeping, there's never been a time in history when a democracy has gone to war with another democracy. So
RFK Jr., I think part of his problem is, and I think it's great that he knows history, but I also think it's important for him to think about what is happening right now in 2023. And I don't care. Historically, it was always that we would support them because they're keeping the peace and yada, yada. Okay, it's 2023. I don't see any peace happening over there right now. I don't see any peace happening. So when the U.S. government is continuing to fund them, we are supporting it. We're supporting the efforts that's happening towards the Palestinian people. We're giving them the arms. We're giving them the money. Come on, man. I don't want to hear about what happened in 1945, 1946. He tend to go back in time to all these different decades. It's just like, well, during my father's year, during my uncle's time, actually in the 50s, and then we used to do this in the 60s. It's 2023. Just because something was right historically doesn't mean it is still right today.
I think our policy in the United States should be to support the growth of democracies around the world. That was the argument for going into invading Iraq. We're going to spread democracy in the Middle East. That's the argument for supporting the Ukrainians, which is the Ukrainians are a democracy and Russia's an autocracy. There's a difference, and Glenn, I agree with you, and I think I do think there's a difference between what we did in Iraq, which is imposing a U.S. system, which I don't think was really democracy at the point of a gun, and going in a preemptive war, which we've never done in our history, on a pretext in which we lied to the American public about weapons of mass destruction and our policy of assisting an existing democracy in the Mideast that has had a long relationship with our country and a long and supportive relationship with our country. But, I think you raised some important points. I think it probably, at this point in history, Israel is much better able to take care of itself than it was in the past. And we need to look at all those things.
Yes. I think, yes, you need to look at it. Now, I want you to hear what Norm Finkelstein said in reference to the children being killed, because I told you I was not having that. Listen to this. This is from Squirrel. Listen to this. Israel has no policy of killing Palestinians. Listen to what Norm Finkelstein said about this particular situation.
You can decide for yourself whether it's minimum force. When Israel leveled 18,000 homes, how many Israeli homes were leveled? 1. Israel killed 550 children. How many Israeli children were killed? 1. Now, you might say, well, that's because Israel has a sophisticated civil defense system or Israel has Iron Dome. I won't go into that. I don't have time now. But there's a simple test. The test is, what did the Israeli combatants themselves see? What did they themselves say? We have the documentation, a report put out by the Israeli ex-combatant organization, Breaking the Silence. It's about 110 pages. You couldn't believe it. I'll tell you, Amy, I still remember when I was reading it. I was in Turkey. I was going to a book festival. I was sitting in the back of a car and reading these descriptions of what the soldiers did. My skin was crawling. I was like shaking. Soldier after soldier after soldier. Now bear in mind, you want to say they're partisan, the soldiers? Read the testimonies. They're not contrite. They're not remorseful. They're just describing what happened. There's no contrition. These aren't lefties, supporters of BDS. What do they describe? One after another says, our orders were shoot to kill anything that moves and anything that doesn't move. one after another says Israel used insane amounts of firepower in Gaza. Israel used lunatic amounts of firepower in Gaza.
These were the Israeli soldiers.
The soldiers, they're describing it. One after another says, we blew up, destroyed, systematically, methodically razed every house in sight.
Yeah. So I think RFK Jr. needs to see that video clip. I think he needs to hear that. And maybe he's probably already been told this before, but for me, man, it's just like, what are you really afraid of? Now, this last segment I want to show is in reference to war with China and his thoughts on that. And I think this is important for people to hear as well.
Let me ask you about China. You just alluded to the fact that we're treating the Russians baselessly as an enemy. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Do you see China in the same way? Do you see them necessarily as an enemy of the United States who needs to be treated as an enemy? Or do you think we can also foster more collaborative or at least less antagonistic relationships with Beijing?
Well, I do see them as an adversary of the United States. I think they're competitive with us, they're ambitious, and they do, the indications are that the Chinese leadership does want to dominate the globe and have access to the natural resources in the developing world. But the worst thing, the Chinese do not want to compete with us militarily. And they shouldn't. I mean, we have 3 times the military budget that they do. We spend more on our military than the next top 10 nations combined. And we have bases we have 800 bases all over the world. The Chinese have 1.5 bases outside of China. So they're not looking for a military competition, and we shouldn't be either. I'm not scared of America competing with China on an economic plane. And I think we should welcome that competition. It would be good for the Chinese, good for the Americans, and good for the rest of the world. We should welcome that and we should de-escalate the military confrontations, take the pressure off of China and Taiwan, de-escalate that controversy and let them figure it out for themselves. And let's compete with them. Let's close most of those bases, bring the money home, get the peace dividend, rebuild our industrial base, and have an economic competition against the Chinese that's friendly, that's congenial, but that's vigorous and robust. And I'm not scared of that. I'm not scared that America cannot outcompete China head-to-head on economic issues.
One of the flashpoints, obviously, but
so there was a little bit of, I saw some of the comments in the chat. People were like, uh-oh, here he goes with the China stuff. But I agree that the bases around the world do need to be closed. I've been agreeing with that for a long time. Like the 800, I think it's like 800 bases now need to be closed around the world. I can get behind him on that. But to the point that Leroy made about looking at it through a capitalist lens, that's exactly what I was thinking as well. He's thinking about this in reference to healthy, competitive, competition through capitalism. Like, yeah, we should welcome this competition and da-da-da. And it's like, at the end of the day, I mean, China is doing things there. China has issues, but China is doing things that I can only dream of us doing in this country, which is trying to find ways to eradicate poverty, right? To wipe out poverty in this country. I would love to do that. But I know, I would not want to go to war with China. I agree with him on that position. But it does seem like it's really interesting to me when we talk about competition and why China is in the place that they're in. Part of that has to do with the fact of NAFTA. We have to remember it was Bill Clinton. It was Bill Clinton who was the one who started NAFTA, where he sent American jobs overseas to countries like China. So, I mean, I feel like now it's like the U.S. government wants to penalize China for being too successful. How dare you get another bank? How dare you move up the ladder? But we're the ones who sent the jobs there.
Between the U.S.-Chinese relationship is Taiwan. the peace has been maintained between the two countries based on this one China policy that said everybody recognizes Taiwan as part of China, but the U.S. would maintain strategic ambiguity in the event of what it would do if China invaded Taiwan and tried to physically control it. Biden, on several occasions, whether planned or otherwise, seemed to have abandoned that 5-decade-old posture of the U.S. government by saying, no, I absolutely would use military force in order to protect Taiwan in the event the Chinese invaded. Do you think that China would actually invade Taiwan if we did what you recommend, namely kind of de-escalate, pull back a little bit from surrounding their country with all the bases we have? And what would be your posture if asked what you would do if China did invade Taiwan? Would you maintain this ambiguity, or would you agree with Biden to say, no, we would absolutely go to war with China to stop them?
Well, that strategic ambiguity only works up to the point of invasion. So once they invade, then your policy is no longer ambiguous. Strategic ambiguity, I think, is the best posture for the United States, and I intend to maintain it. So I'm not going to tell you what I would do on this, TV show and lose that advantage. I don't think the Chinese want a military confrontation with Taiwan. Taiwan is armed to the teeth. And it's been preparing for 40 years for a war with China if there's an invasion, to repel an invasion, and it would be a catastrophe for China and the rest of the world if Taiwan went to war and we lost the source of a lot of our computer chips and many of the electronics that are now used in Taiwan that are absolutely vital to our industries. The Chinese have the same dependence. So I don't think the Chinese want to go to war with Taiwan. They may exert pressures to have a greater degree of reunification like they did with Hong Kong. But, I think we should try to let them settle it on their own before we start making military threats and rattling sabers, which I think just makes it more difficult for everybody and makes it more likely that we'll end up in a military confrontation.
So I hear what he's saying about letting them handle this on their own. Stay out of this. Don't get involved. But it's still funny to me when people talk about this conflict because they talk about it as though Taiwan is not a part of China. Taiwan's a part of China. It just kind of reminds me of someone saying Washington, D.C. is not a part of the United States. Washington, D.C. is a part of the United States. It's just, I don't know. That's why this whole conflict with China and Taiwan is just weird to me. I'm like, what do you mean? People talk about it as though China, Taiwan is not a part of China.
I think you answered this question in the previous answer, but I just want to be very clear about it because I'm super interested in it, which is you described the way in which you thought, and I think clearly it's true, that the U.S. has been provoking Russia, kind of expanding NATO right up into its borders, right on the most sensitive part of their border, changing their government, the democratically elected government, from a pro-Russia to an anti-Russia government. Imagine if the Chinese did that to a government in Mexico while arming them, all the other analogies that you pointed out in the way that we're kind of encircling Russia, making them more aggressive and paranoid. Do you think we're doing the same thing when it comes to China with all of these bases we're putting in Guam and Australia and South Korea and the Philippines, including nuclear tipped missiles, sending B-52s that are nuclear capable? Do you think a lot of what is happening is that the U.S. itself is being provocative unnecessarily?
Yeah, I think it's the same people. It's the neocons in the White House and the State Department who want a war with China. I don't think they're ambiguous about it. They believe that the United States should use its military force while we still have this incredible superiority to dominate the globe with violence. That is the entire philosophy of the neocons, and I think it's been a catastrophe. Every venture that they've brought us into has been a cataclysm, and a China war will be the end of the world.
Without question.
And they don't seem to care. They do not.
And they don't even care. So I'm totally glad he's not down for that. But yeah, just a really interesting conversation. If you want to see that full interview, you will need to check that out on Rumble, because on YouTube, he actually just put different sections up, and I only saw 3 when I checked it again today, but the full version is on Rumble. Oh man, what a heated conversation. Oh man, when I did see when Glenn announced on Twitter that RFK Jr. was coming on, I was like, oh boy, I hope he's ready for this one, because I think Glenn asked really good questions. And like I said, that's the first time I saw RFK Jr. appear a little bit uncomfortable compared to other interviews I've seen him ask. I want him to have that conversation with Max Blumenthal about the Israel-Palestine issue. Martha said RFK needs to keep hearing from more people about the truth of Palestine. Yes, a discussion with Max Blumenthal also needs to happen. 100%. 100%. Oh boy. Blunts and Otters. Cornel West said he hasn't even talked to Bernie since he announced his run. That should be an interesting conversation. Thank you for the super chat. None of your business. RFK has been living in a tunnel. He is totally uninformed about the world. He should already know this stuff. Knows less than Trump. Yeah, I feel like he just keeps referring back to history. Like I totally get what happened in the past, but just because it was okay in the past doesn't mean it's okay right now. If that were the case, like a lot of the laws that we had back then would still be in place today. And thank you for this as well. So far, I am very disappointed. I'm sorry, none of your business. Thank you for the super chat. Oz, RFK Jr. obviously wrong on this issue. He's toast. Thank you, Matilde. Tyanism is zeroism. Dwayne says, I watched that interview with Greenwald and I was like, I'm done. I'm sorry, Dwayne. I know you liked him. I know you did. I'm sorry. Now, there is one more question I need to cover for Ohio ballot initiative, and that should wrap up the BIs for Ohio. This one is pretty important, the voting requirement. So we're going back to Ohio ballot initiatives. Ohio issue number 2, citizenship voting requirement amendment, where a yes vote supported prohibiting local governments from allowing non-citizens or those who lack the qualifications of an elector to vote in local elections. This passed by 76.90%. Interesting. This prohibits local governments from allowing persons who lack certain qualifications to vote in local elections. These qualifications are being 18 years old or older, being a resident of the state, county, township, or ward, having been registered to vote for 30 days, and having the qualifications of an elector. Were non-citizens allowed to vote in Ohio? No jurisdictions in Ohio allowed non-citizens to vote in elections. In 2019, the village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, the village of Yellow Springs, Ohio held a referendum on whether non-citizens could vote in local elections. The referendum passed 891 to 650, 58% to 42%. Interesting. So who supported this? State Representatives Edwards, Seats, Stevens, and LaRose, Republicans. Organizations, Americans for Tax Reform, Ohio Chamber of Commerce. One of the arguments was that non-citizens are actually citizens of other countries and owe their primary political allegiance to another nation where they can return home at any point. Giving the citizens of other countries the right to vote in state and local elections is contrary to the fundamental principles of self-governance and will ultimately tear apart the connections of a free and independent people. That is interesting. Opposition. State Representatives Hagan and Skindle, Democrats. One of the arguments was, I believe that this is another attempt at suppressing the vote and keeping individuals from being able to participate in their local community. If you're paying taxes, you should have a say in what's happening in your local community. Now, was there any campaign finance money spent to support or oppose? Zero. and that is Ohio. On Thursday, we will start Oklahoma. Should be interesting times. All right, Eric, I think we may have one more on Rockfin. I'm going to take a quick break and then we'll do call in. I want to hear your thoughts about tonight's stories. It's been a wild time, but Eric's going to take it over for a couple minutes and I'll be back.
All right. It's Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is the part of the show where we give our Sabrina a little break before we jump into the call-in. Let's see. Let me put in that call-in link again. Let me get to the right tab here. There it is. So if you want, let's see. All right. So then when we jump into call-in, you can do call-in on your browser. You can install the call-in app on your smartphone and do call-in this way. Let's take a little preview here of what our call-in is going to look like. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Sabby call-in, episode 112. Can you imagine? We've done 112 of these. RFK Jr., Tara Reade, mutual aid, and more. And of course, call-in is where we want to hear from you and what you got to say. And you can talk about these topics or really anything you want. And let me hit this paid chat on the Rockfin from Mr. Roger Meadows, who said, Sabby, I made sure to watch this on YouTube before your show. Notice RFK never answered the question. Glenn asked, would you continue giving money to prop up the Israeli government? And he went into a diatribe about who is good and bad. We don't need to understand your personal feelings. Just would you continue sending our money to them, point blank? Man, hate to ask about reparations. Sheesh. Thanks for that tip comment on the Rockfins, Roger. Yeah, I mean, to me, these recent things with RFK Jr., especially on Israel Palestine, really just basically ended his candidacy among like the real left as far as I'm concerned. I don't see how anyone who gets these things can really stay engaged and excited about his campaign. And I'm just having trouble really seeing what his constituency is going forward. Given the China, I mean, he's doing this kind of standard democratic oppositional stance with China, and like in terms of the economics, I mean, the reason why the jobs went over there and the reason why we're dependent on Chinese goods and chips from Taiwan and things like that is because that's what the capitalists set up on our side of things to make money. And it's all just about the dollars. And the reason why, in my opinion, you have this Ukraine war, you have these tensions with China, it's just all down to money. It's profitable to do these things. And it's, and that, war tensions are profitable. And that's why we have these things happening. Now, the other thing that's been floating around that I'm sure we'll talk about in the call-in is Cornel West and whether he is really going to the Green Party. It sounds like there's stuff happening. There was a really good RBN stream the other day where they had two people from the Green Party. They had Justin B, who we see around here, and another person, and they were talking about like coalescing and building a coalition and those and that type of thing. And I thought I was really encouraged by that and by the optimism. And one of the things I've been thinking is that if Cornel makes that jump, like what's going to happen with what's been set up so far with People's Party, because they had a pretty good platform set up there and on an issues page. And so what it got me thinking is like, well, if he should have a really good platform. It's just Cornel West in general, regardless of the party and the page and whatnot. And so I thought I would just take a stab at doing that. Like, what would that look like instead of just talking about it? What if we tried to do that? And I thrown something together and posted it. If you go to old 11demands.org, I got it. There we go. Hey, the search knows me. And I put together what I'm calling a proposed platform for a real left candidate. And it's kind of similar to what I put together for 11 Demands. It's also pulling things from the current issues page on Cornel West's for his candidacy. And, I don't know, Cornell, if you're listening and you want, some platform ideas, feel free to borrow or steal anything from here. You've got, clean out government corruption, which I think needs to be the first thing, needs to be the number one thing. And that's about passing clean elections law. I think there needs to be a constitutional fix. Ban corporate lobbying was like, it was straight off of Cornell's page, what was posted there, revolving door politics. And, we're going to have to concentrate on the money and focus it and make it first, because if we don't fix the money, nothing's going to change. You got, healthcare for all. I think we need to be saying healthcare for all, not just Medicare for all. Medicare for all is a compromise. We need real healthcare for all. That means, a real U.S. NHS style system and so forth. And I'll just go quickly to the rest here. Create a minimum standard of living, end the wars. These aren't surprising, difficult things, but I think they really need to be put together clearly, as a platform, as a set of demands. Protect civil liberties. And this one was very, parts of this they had on there already. Racial and criminal justice reform. Provide reparations by a solution that treats them what they are, a debt owed. I think any presidential campaign like his needs to have racial justice and reparations, front and center as just a key part of it. And of course, this gets into mass incarceration, police budgets, and whatnot. Climate emergency, needs to be a plank in there. Revitalize our economy was one that they had in there that I'm kind of borrowing and putting in other things. Fix our infrastructure. Immigration reform sometimes doesn't get talked about that much, but it should be in there. An election system we can trust. We need to, trust the election system, and revamp taxation and funding. All right. So there's my attempt at making a platform, and we'll see if anyone wants to run with it. Right.
Right. And Dr. West has officially announced it on Twitter. So it is official that he is pursuing a run through the Green Party. So I just saw that actually. So that is official.
That is new.
That's right.
Jeez. Where can we talk about this?
Yeah. I knew this was coming. I've known for a while, actually since Monday, because I had already, I've been keeping a secret. I told you guys, I had already heard from a Green Party person that was in place. So I was just like, well, I'll wait until he announces it. So yeah, this is going to be interesting. I mean, the Green Party does have ballot access on multiple states. I remember Jill Stein got on the ballot in, I think it was over 40 states, if I remember correctly. So I think this will be better for him. And I wish him the best. So here we go.
Super chat from Roger.
Oh, thank you, Roger. Or we can say outlaw private health care instead. That too. I do want to announce this because I'm not live on Wednesdays. But I do want to announce this because I'm not live on Wednesdays. But tomorrow, Dr. Cornell West will be on Black Power Media. And then after that, he's going to be on RBN with Nick. So Nick's going to interview him as well. So Dr. West is making the rounds. So check that out. Should be a good time. We are heading on over to call in. I want to hear your thoughts. So many things to talk about. This is episode 112. RFK Jr., Tara Reade, mutual aid, and more. Let's discuss RFK Jr.'s response to Glenn Greenwald, Tara Reade's situation, mutual aid party, and more. And we can also talk about Dr. West now running through the Green Party. So super pumped. The link is pinned at the top of the chat. So you can click on that and hop on over and call in and talk to me. If you don't have the app, you can still use your laptop to call in as well. So let's head on over there and I will be starting on time. All right. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.